Super Earth, our home. Prosperity. Liberty.
Hi there.
Democracy. Our way of life.
Oh, hello.
But freedom doesn't come free.
No! Sweet liberty! No! Look familiar?
Scenes like these are happening all over the galaxy right now. You could be next. That is, unless you make the most important decision of your life. Prove to yourself that you have the strength and the courage to be...
Debates that are really not about making progress, but mutual recrimination. So I'm, just very delighted.
It's not that loud.
Library for decades, and I was with we had a round table up in the Canadian border, Canadian-Vermont border, and the member of Parliament from
one shudders to envisage what repulsive larvae gestates within the gloom as we speak.
Madame Bibot was with us. And when we were with some folks who ran businesses on the Vermont side and on the Canadian side, and some of whom had operations on both sides. Most of these were family businesses. Some were very large, some were small. They ranged from like farmers, and they on the Vermont side got their fertilizer from Canada. That's true. They all across the northern border. So it would be Minnesota, the Idaho. So many of the farmers all along Canadian.
Just gonna do some super quick ones.
Relationship with Canada to get their fertilizer. It can be cost 25% more. And we all know how hard our farmers work. Nobody works harder. The margins of what they make is tiny. You add a 25% tariff. I mean, these people are just, they don't know what's going to happen.
One mission.
And our maple syrup makers.
Help us try.
We get a lot of syrup from Canada, blend it, and make it into a product. Vermont syrup, and Canada's the biggest producer of maples, the second best maple syrup in the world. Vermont is the biggest producer of the best maple syrup in the world, in the United States. But the equipment is largely made that our sugar makers use is largely manufactured in Canada. 25% tariff on that. That's going to hammer the Vermont maple producers. Again, they operate on a small margin. You know, a lot of these farms, as you know, and the sugar producers, we've got a family company up there, second generation, that makes high quality furniture. These are family businesses, and they have tight margins. They're competing. They're really working hard. The Northeast Kingdom is really a pretty low income part of Vermont, with wonderful, incredibly hardworking people. We're very proud of where they live and who they are and who their neighbors are. They're asking really tough questions about how they can make it, whether they can stay in business. And this is not the same as immigration, but there's an element here that is the same as immigration. Shouldn't any policy that we pursue?
There we go. There we go. Yeah, just gonna do a bunch of these real quick.
I love to watch my Senate colleagues, but other people are not. It's a habit of mine because I think what you do when no one is watching is really.
Should be more than enough.
There's a belief I have that someone who's nice to you, not nice to the waiter, is not a nice person. And we have a lot of people shows you are one of those people. What I love about watching you is that it could be the farthest person looking from you. You just have this, like, you look at people like you see their divinity. Whether it's a person at the highest position, a leader of the Senate on either side, or someone that holds the world. What I love about you is when I watch you, you're one of the senators. Some people look to their side of the aisle. I always look up and I find you over there talking. And I just rely on that decency in you as a friend. And I've come to love you like a brother. And I want to thank you for being here before your alarm this morning goes off. It really touches me. And I don't know if you remember this, but about 12 hours ago, I sat right here and you embraced me in a hug. And I leaned on that hug because I wasn't sure that I would even make it 12 hours. I take strength from you, my friend, and I take strength from you to hold my kindness, to look for it. This is a story I don't think I've ever shared with you. It speaks to how we get things done and how we should get things done. But when I first got to the United States Senate, my mentor, Bill Bradley, gave me 3 real lessons for me to learn. I think I've obeyed 2 out of 3. One was to know the rules of procedure really well. That's the one I probably failed. Still learning things 13 years into this rules of procedure. The second one was become a specialist in some areas. Don't be a mile wide. I feel like I've done a pretty good job on that. But the one that he called me that was most fruitful, I've already mentioned, one of the benefits I had. You observed democracy called Wait. He commanded me to go and meet with all the Republican colleagues, take them out to dinner, sit with them for lunch, whatever they are. I went out to dinner with Ted Cruz. It was hard to find a restaurant because I'm a vegan. Ted Cruz is from Texas. But I still remember that we went out and how people were sort of shocked to see 2 human beings breaking bread. But the story I want to tell my friend about is when I went to see Jim Inhofe, Republican from the same state as Langford. get him to
Democracy's on its way.
couldn't get on the schedule. And I found out that he had Bible study in his hideaway. And so I go up to his hideaway for Bible study there.
Remember.
We all have implicit biases. All have implicit biases.
Grenade.
Was that I did not expect this older, conservative man that I would walk in and see on his mantle this beautiful picture centered of him hugging a woman. I'm embarrassed by that. And I, especially in those days, I didn't talk to them like the senior giants in the Senate. I didn't call them by their first names. I still have a problem calling Senator Durbin by his first name, for example. He's a lion of the Senate, in my opinion, and one of the kindest people to me since I've been here. But, so I go to him, so to Jim and Hall, I go, Mr. Chairman, sir? I look at the picture and I go, who that? And then he smiles and chuckles. Then he tells me the most beautiful story of his family adopting this little black girl out of the most, some of the most terrible circumstances. And I was so moved. And thinking about my friend Bill Bradley, I would have never known this incredible thing about somebody whose ideology, so many things, but knowing his personal moment created this thread between us, both not before, but a thread that connected me to him and had created a deeper affection. So fast forward many months in this body, and there's a big education bill which Chris Murphy referenced earlier. A big education bill was going through the Senate because No Child Left Behind is going back the other way. Senator Durbin's told me about this pendulum sometimes swings back in this place. It was a deal. Lamar Alexander was in the well of the Senate, he was the manager of the bill, and there was no amendments allowed. No amendments allowed. And of course, I'm sitting back here where I sat, and you talk about ego, my ego thing, I had this great amendment. I was frustrated that they were having this rule all that. So I got a great amendment to do something about foster children that have the worst educational outcomes. And I feel like this amendment is trying to make this difference for American children that are in foster care or that were homeless. And I'm frustrated. I'm sitting back here doing something that I dream of doing again one day. Sitting and just kind of upset. And then I see walking Bill Gore, Senator Jim Inhofe, he walks to the well, kind of talking, and I remember the story he told me about this little black girl and his family, and something tells me to get up, and I walk into the well, down these steps, and I say to him, Mr. Chairman, sir, I know how much you care for children in tough circumstances. I have an amendment, and I explained my amendment to him, and he looked at me and he gave me the Senate version of no, which is, I'll think about it. And I got frustrated, and I said, thank you, sir, for considering it. And I walked back, and I sat down right here.
A little.
And then when I my head up,
mostly just trying to do some quick diving. Yeah. I'm gonna go private.
Marches up to me and just sort of grunts at me. And then turns around, starts walking away from me, and I step up. I go, wait, excuse me. What do you mean? He goes, Cory, I'm going to co-sponsor your amendment. And I was so happy. And now I go over to Senator Grassley.
Make some changes finally.
Say the same thing to him. A relationship.
Holy moly. I'm not picking that again.
Relationship with him, even though
I may pick almost any other, but that one.
He looks at me and he goes, you got Inhofe? And he signs on my. By the time I go to Lamar Alexander, I look at him and I'm like, I got a full house. I'm sorry, I got no other Democrats, but I got all these Republicans.
Rage
And he
against
looks
the
at me and
enemy's
he laughs. He goes, really? And he puts the amendment on the bill for all the
remorseless in
land.
their expansion. We must not let
so,
this world fall.
What you said
This
in the beginning
operation would strike a
your
mighty
question,
blow.
my dear friend, my dear brother, is how real change is made. That man, Dick Durbin, when I first got to the Senate, he knew how much I cared about criminal justice reform. He brought me to the table. I started working. As I presided, I started working in conversations with Mike Lee and conversations with Chuck Grassley. We cobbled together a bill. It wasn't done by executive fiat. It was done in the Senate. 87 votes. It's the law of the land. Thousands have been liberated from unjust incarceration. And so my point to the senator is his spirit is so right, is so true about what it takes to make real change. But the president we have right now doesn't seem to be coming to this body with any kind of bold bipartisan legislation to solve the problems of our nation, to cobble together the common ground of this country on immigration. No, he is not acting like that. He is using language like presidential primacy. He's defending his corrupt practices in immigration by saying things like presidential primacy. He's invoking the Alien Enemies Act. He's evoking the Alien Enemies Act from the 1700s to deny due process, which Anton Scalia, a textualist, says that whether you're born in this country or not, you have due process here. The Constitution states only one thing twice. Both the 5th and the 14th Amendment say that no one, not no citizen, no one shall be deprived of liberty or property without due process of law. And yet this president is disappearing people. And as we documented here, disappearing the wrong people. As we documented here, detaining unjustly Americans, separating families, all while pushing his agenda and doing things that the values of people on both sides of this aisle don't believe in, like stopping the investigation of children for alleged sexual molestation. This is wrong. And I sat down with some of the advocates who were telling me we're trying to fight to stop the law from being broken, and they scared me, McDermott. Because they said what I said on this floor. If someone is willing to violate the Constitution for some, it endangers the constitutional rights for us all. Do not think this is, those people. If they are violating rights of some, it is a threat to the rights of all. I am standing here because of a national crisis that is growing. We talked about Social Security. We talked about health care. We talked about education. This is a crisis for us. And this is what the person said. They talked about the Insurrection Act. They've been hearing people in the administration talk about the Insurrection Act. Every person in this Congress across the country wants a safe and secure border. But scapegoating immigrants to erode basic constitutional freedoms does not make America safer, does not make our unity safer, does not reform our immigration system like we should be doing in a bipartisan manner like Langford and Murphy. It does not stand our long-standing problem for our agricultural industry, for our tech industry. History has shown that when due process...
So they fixed that, huh? Fucking bums. Sure, let's fix this immediately. God forbid people should have that decent, you know, auto charge in the Quasar cannon. Like, how is that an immediate fix option? Jesus Christ. Jerks.
Then they came for the trade unionists. I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews. I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me. No one was left to speak.
Come on.
Everything that has happened in the last 2 months contradicts American values, shared values. I'm most concerned about what this signals for the future and the potential invocation of this president of the Insurrection Act. Some of our country's most prominent lawyers have warned that the invocation of these two antiquated laws, the Alien Enemies Act and the Insurrection Act, may result in the true erosion of our constitutional rights.
Yep, they fixed it. Wonderful. Typical useless fix.
Scalia says is wrong. And then on the first day in office, Trump directed the Secretaries of Defense and Homeland Secretary, the Secretaries of Defense and the Secretaries of Homeland Security, Trump directed them to initiate a 90-day review to determine whether the president should invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807. That 90-day review, when do those 90 days come up, folks? This month, in 19 days, April 20th, the President of the United States, who's already voted a 1780-something law, also asked his immigration folks, his Homeland Security folks, to do a 90-day review about the Insurrection Act of 1807. Now, there's people probably watching and say, what is the Insurrection Act? I bet a lot of folks have to look up what the Alien Enemies Act was. So let me tell folks what the Insurrection Act that our president, on his first day in office, of all the things the president has to do, he turned to the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Homeland Security to initiate a review of the Insurrection Act. America, what is the Insurrection Act of 1807? It's among the president's most powerful authorities that he can deploy the U.S. Armed Forces and militia during a national emergency. He can declare a national emergency. This president has already wrongfully declared a national emergency. Declared a national emergency on energy. Senator Kane talked about the outrageousness of somebody declaring a national emergency on energy when we are at the highest level of petrochemical extraction in our country's history. And until he started rolling back what we were doing on wind and solar, we had an all of the above. Joe Biden drilled station drilled for the Joe Biden. The Insurrection Act gives the ability of the president to declare a national emergency to suppress insurrection, to quell civil unrest or domestic violence, and enforce the law when he believes it's being obstructed. When can the president invoke the Insurrection Act? Well, nothing in the text of the law defines insurrection, rebellion, or domestic violence. Those are the prerequisites for its deployment, but they don't define those things. One of Trump's first executive orders, signed the evening he took office on January 20th, was titled Declaring a National Emergency at the Southern Border of the United States. In that order, he said American sovereignty is under attack. He has already declared a national emergency. Neither Congress nor the courts played a role in deciding what constitutes an obstruction or a rebellion. If Trump does unlawfully invoke the Insurrection Act, he will use our military to carry out the deportation agenda within our country's borders. All while any due process or opportunity to prove that their presence in the U.S. is lawful, or even that they are a citizen. Trump himself said he wants to deport American citizens to foreign countries.
Fucking asshole.
I want to deport American citizens to foreign countries. On February 4th, he said, and I quote, "I'm just saying, if we had a legal right to do it, I would do it in a heartbeat. I don't know if we do or not. We're looking at it right now." This is what he has asked his Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Homeland Security to say, can I invoke the Insurrection Act? So don't be mistaken. This is not just about immigrants. This is not just denying immigrants the due process that Anton Scalia said that immigrants have a right to. So you don't disappear the wrong people like the Trump administration has done. That you don't wildly disagree with what a citizen is saying and use that as a pretext to disappear them. He is creating the pretext to invoke that 1807 law, the Insurrection Act. And if he does that, they came for the immigrants and denied them due process. He is trying to get us to surrender our commitment to the constitutional guarantees that Americans have. He has said he would invoke, he would deport Americans if he could. When the president denies due process to some in America, it threatens the due process of all. Let's see what happens on April 20th. This president, who's already invoked the Alien Enemies Act, follows through and invokes the Insurrection Act. Why wait till April 20th? Raise your voice now. Stand up now. Do something now. Cause some good trouble now. Let this president know that if he does ever do that, there will be a rising up of people's voices. A rising up of good trouble, as John Lewis would say, to say, not in my country. This is unacceptable.
The senator yields for a question.
To Senator Dick Durbin, somebody who's been my mentor and friend, I will yield for a question while retaining the floor.
What a champ.
Thank you. I first want to acknowledge this extraordinary moment in the history of the Senate.
Thank you.
I believe you've been holding the floor now for more than 10 hours.
My whole shift.
Go on it even longer. And you've been joined by your colleague and friend, Senator Murphy of Connecticut. And
Yes.
I'm sorry to take the early morning shift, but I didn't want to miss this moment in history. Not just for the historic nature of it, but for the substance of it as well. I just remind my colleague and fellow member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, it was only 3, maybe 4 weeks ago that we had witnesses before the Judiciary Committee. And I asked a question. One of them is pending on the calendar, the executive calendar on the floor. His name is Dean Sauer, Missouri, and he's seeking the position of Solicitor General of the United States. Along with him was the lady who was aspiring to be the Assistant Deputy Attorney General for Civil Rights, Harmeet Dillon, and Aaron Reitz, who's been approved by the Senate for the legal policy position. And the questioning went to the basics of our Constitution, you have noted here today, and that is, what is the check and balance on a president? What is the accountability of the president of the Constitution? As I read it, I don't profess to be expert, I'm still learning. As I read it, the accountability of the president is in Article 2. Article 3, Article 3 is the judiciary. Ultimately, the president can be held accountable by impeachment in Congress or by decision of the court. Some of the orders that he is promulgating are inconsistent with law and the Constitution. And the question that was asked of the witnesses who are seeking positions in the Department of Justice, can a public official defy a court order? It seems so fundamental and basic. The answer is no, of course, but these 3 witnesses all equivocated in their own ways, which raises the question, if this president is not held accountable by a court order, what then can control a president who misuses their office to the detriment of the nation or the people who live here? And that, I thought, was a fundamental question. It was interesting to note, you may remember, that one of our Republican colleagues on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, after hearing these witnesses equivocate on whether a public official can defy a court order, came to the committee and basically said, what are you saying? The answer is obvious. You can criticize a decision of the court within the bounds of
Lamest fucking patch.
You can appeal a decision.
You know, I'm not even gonna use the fucking candies. How about that?
Your recourse is to
Fucking
quit,
dumb.
resign, leave. The Constitution has the last word. The courts have the last word. And I think that's a question that you're raising today. Where is the accountability of the President of the United States when he misuses the power of office. In cases that you've mentioned, the Alien Enemies Act, it's a law that's been around since, I think, 1807 or somewhere around time. I think it's clear, unless you have declared a war or unless you are invaded, you cannot invoke the Alien Enemies Act as this president has done. And he's being challenged in that regard. Yesterday, our friend, Senator Grassley, who chairs the Judiciary Committee, and I say, friend, some people back home say, don't say that anymore. We don't talk to these people. They're wrong. This is a body where we do talk to one another, and we should, and for good reason. Well, he raised the question yesterday, why is President Trump being challenged so often in court? Well, he has issued 102 executive orders. I don't know if that's a record, but I bet it is. 102 executive orders questioning something as basic as birthright sovereignty, birthright citizenship. And so the point that I'm getting to is, in obvious situations here, where President Trump has gone too far, where is the accountability? It's not going to be an impeachment. We're realists. We know that the Republican House of Representatives is not likely to ever consider that. It could be in the courts. And if it goes to the courts, the question is, will this president follow a court order if it goes against this policy?
No, he won't.
If he won't follow that court order, where is the accountability? Where is the check and balance? Where is the constitutional framework, which is supposed to be at the foundation of this democracy? I think you're raising important questions. In the Insurrection Act, the use of our military for political purposes is a frightening prospect. It's something we have avoided throughout our history and should continue to. And I just commend you for raising this point because I believe it's timely. It's as timely as the questions that we asked the Department of Justice nominees about the enforceability of court orders. The question is now, will the American people speak up? I'm counting on some of our Republican friends to speak up too. Throughout history, there have been moments when the party other than the president's party showed extreme courage, political courage, and spoke up. We need that kind of voice now. I thank you for raising it on the floor this morning. My question to you is, at this moment in time, as we ask these nominees whether they would follow a court order or defy it, doesn't that get to the basics of our constitutional democracy?
Yes, it does. I mean, you put forth this litany that where we have to ask ourselves is, at what point do my colleagues in the House or the Senate, the Republican Party say, enough? God bless John Kennedy for calling out the absolute absurd. I was in that hearing where you have nominees for some of the highest positions in the administration failing to say that they will abide by the court order. I mean, that is something we haven't heard people on either side of nominees just say so bluntly now, not yes, I will follow the orders of the court. They're equivocating. And God bless one of my colleagues, John Kennedy, who said that's absurd. You either obey the order or you resign. Because we have a constitution. And so, when is it enough? When is it enough? This is the week. This is the month of Passover. And there's a wonderful song I love singing when I'm at a Pesach with Diane. It would have been enough, is the song, God just delivered us from Egypt. It would have been enough if he parted the seas. It would have been enough. Diane. This is a kind of a twisted version of that. When is it enough? When the President of the United States starts a meme coin on his first day, violating the emoluments clause immediately.
A meme coin on day one.
An agency that is on the front lines of stopping infectious diseases like Ebola or tuberculosis-resistant, drug-resistant tuberculosis from coming here. Is that enough? When we created that in Congress and he had no right to stop that agency, was that enough? When is it enough for him to issue executive orders that trample on the highest ideals of this land? When he mocks members of the court so badly that even the current Chief Justice admonishes him, when is it enough? When Elon Musk is indiscriminately people and then realizing, oops, we need the FAA safety regular folks are helping us keep our regulation. When is it enough that you will say, okay, I'll call them in and have a hearing, create some transparency in what he's doing? When is it enough when he activates the Alien Enemies Acts and starts disappearing human beings without due process? When is it enough? Well, it's enough for me. It's enough for me. 12 hours now I'm standing, and I'm still going strong because this president is wrong.
Thank you.
And he's violating principles that we hold dear and principles in this document that are so clear and plain. The powers of the Article 1 branch are spelled out, and he is violating them. Don't take my word for it. Republican appointed judges, Democrat appointed judges are saying it and stopping him, and then he maligns the judge that did that. When is it enough for people to speak out and not just fall in line to put patriotism over a person that's in the White House? So to your question, sir, to my friend, and I'm sorry to get a little animated at this early morning hour, but I am so frustrated. And not just because of that, but I'm reading the stories. We're going into the next section, which is national security, and I'm reading the stories of our citizens of this country, not just New Jerseyans. There's a lot we've read in these 12 hours, but there are people from all over the country are reaching out to my office, and I know they are yours. You're the second highest ranking Democrat in here. I know they're reaching out to you because you're a man that stands for justice. I know they reach out to your office too because you're one of these outposts for sanity in a Congress that is being too complicit to an executive that is overstepping his authority and violating the Constitution and hurting people who rely on health care, Social Security. Reading these stories, sir, because the voices of the Americans that don't have the privilege of the 100 of us don't get to stand here, but I believe the power of the people is greater than the people in power. That's the ideal of our democracy and our Constitution. So I'm rip-roaring and ready. I'm wide awake. I'm going to stand here for as many hours as I can, 12 hours, and I recognize that my other friend, another person I consider more than a friend, like a sister to me, from the state of New York, my neighbor.
Senator Booker, would you yield for a question?
My sister, for you, I will yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Senator Booker, I've been listening to this debate all night, and I gotta say, you're on fire. And you're on fire because the American people are very, very angry about what is happening. They are not happy with what this administration has done. It's contrary to what was promised. It's contrary to what was expected. And I know we're going to talk about national security in a few minutes, but can I ask a question about one of the topics you talked about last night? Because it was exactly what my constituents were talking to me about yesterday. So I was in New York yesterday, and we talked these cuts in Social Security to say it was stopped by the gentleman who worked at Amtrak. He said, Madam Senator, I just want to thank you for protecting my Social Security. That has never happened to me before. Never happened at Amtrak to be stopped by someone who worked there for one thing I had done that day. But I'm telling you, Senator Booker, when Elon Musk starts firing people in Social Security and tells the Social Security Administration, you cannot answer the phone, what are our mothers and fathers and grandmothers supposed to do? Many of them are not readily available to be on a computer. Many of them can't ask their question online. Worse, Elon Musk is expecting them to show up in person at a Social Security office. Older Americans are driving one. Or another step towards collective liberation. Getting in the subway to get to a Social Security Administration because there's stairs or because the lighting's not good enough. These are the challenges that our older Americans have. And so I just want to talk about the things you told us last night about the risk of Social Security. Social Security is our
Oh gosh, right?
money.
Social Security. Damn.
It's their money. So what
That talk.
happens when you make it hard for a senior to call and make sure their check's on the way, or their check never showed up and they can't find it? For a lot of older Americans, that Social Security check is the only money they have for that month. It pays for food,
Yep.
right? It pays for heating bills. It pays for their medicine. It pays for their rent. It pays for everything they need to survive. And if Elon Musk doesn't believe anybody should be answering the phones, who is he to tell
Right.
America how to run a Social Security Administration when our citizens need those checks?
Crazy South
They
African.
crippled the phone service. Even though, get this one, you can't answer the phone, cripple the phone service, you can only make an appointment on the phone. So how are you supposed to make an appointment if you are going to go in? I mean, that's absurd. They plan to cut 7,000 staff. That's a lot of staff. 7,000 staff. Even though Social Security Administration is down
Fuck.
year low. So
That was bullshit.
when they are saying this is about they just want the money. And what do they want the money for? Reporting to the press. Elon Musk. It's absurd. It is an outrageous. Should be concerned. Social Security. President Trump, hands off. They are rallying all across the country to say hands off Social Security, hands off Medicare, hands off Medicaid. It's an outrage, and I don't think people should stand for it. Because your Social Security check is your hard-earned money. It is not for Elon Musk to play with, to shift around, or send it to tax breaks for his billionaire friends.
Jeez.
Now, my office has been working closely with one senior. Now she's a New Yorker with a disability, and she was told that she had to call a specific representative's extension by the end of March. Well, that was yesterday. And if she didn't get this person, her application could be denied. She's called every, sometimes more than once a day. She has been on hold for 4 to 5 hours just to reach this representative. So yesterday, when we reached out to her, she had still not reached the representative. So Americans across the country are panicked. They are stressed. They are worried they won't get their hard-earned money back, their retirement, to pay for the things that they need. And this is the money they've spent their entire careers. Every time you get a paycheck, Senator Booker, there's a line that says Social Security is that money that's taken out of your paycheck and put in Social Security so it's there.
Mm-hmm.
Paid sitting here right here.
But that's not exactly how it works, but whatever.
Your first paycheck, isn't it? I bet it is your first paycheck. That you want saved so that when you can't even imagine somebody to be 65. But the day you're working here, the fact that you spent all night here supporting Senator Booker, that's your retirement. Would you be pissed off Elon Musk with your retirement? Should be. He doesn't have any right to it, and what he's doing is he's doing it by cutting staff. So if you need help because your Social Security in your eye, then how you supposed to get that back? They can't issue you a new one unless they know you didn't show the mailing you're supposed to. Ultimately, cutting individuals from Social Security doesn't just affect them, it affects the entire economy. So you can imagine if all our seniors are getting the Social Security
Ooh, that's
benefit,
toasty.
you can't go then buy your groceries. You're not going to be able to then go buy whatever you need for your home. Those stores will get less money, and that means there'll be less resources in the economy. Social Security, if you didn't know it, it's our country's largest anti-poverty program. It keeps people out of poverty. That's what it does. When we designed Social Security however many decades ago, it was so that our seniors don't die in poverty. Because they were dying. About half the seniors at that time were dying didn't have enough food to live. And so we created Social Security. It's one of the most popular programs. It's one of the most effective programs. So reducing access to this key program, Senator Booker, is an outrage.
Dive to the surface.
It's harmful. It's cruel. It's hurtful. So I know that this is something that you really spent a lot of time on last night. But don't you think it's cruel to not allow phone service? Don't you think it's wrong to make it harder for people to get access to their hard-earned money? Don't you think this is something that America did not sign up for in this election?
I read last night, thank you for the question, my friend. I read last night some of the most painful letters of people over and over again from throughout my state and through other states who are living in fear, who use words like terrified and told stories that they couldn't sleep because of the rhetoric of this president, the rhetoric of Elon Musk calling it a Ponzi scheme, telling lies during the joint address. And then I read stories from people that work in Social Security. They're telling about having desks and the waiting lines and the inefficiency that this has created and the horrible, deteriorating customer service. And I've been trying as much as I can during this last 12 hours to read stories of Republicans. Yes. To read editorials from the Wall Street Journal to just show that this isn't a partisan thing. This isn't about left or right. It's about right or wrong. It's about, will we as a country honor our commitments that we made? And then I read independent folks that are saying this is crazy, that this program is even in jeopardy.
Question for you, because I know you want to move on to some national security issues this morning.
I will yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Thank you, Senator Booker. So the other thing that stressed out my constituents that I talked about this weekend is air safety. They're very, very stressed out about these cuts to the FAA. You know, there was a plane crash not too far from here. Helicopter crash. Everyone in the helicopter perished. We've been reading about stories across the country about flight safety and the fact that there are near collisions all the time. We had a horrible crash in New York, in Buffalo, Colgan Air crash. I've gotten to know the families over the last several years because they've worked together for legislation to make sure we have pilot safety. But what I've been watching in terms of this administration is they don't seem to care. They just have made up this idea that cuts across the board are necessary to get rid of fraud, waste in the budget. And I agree, we can make government more efficient, but the way you do that is at least learn what each of these agencies do. Study what's happening in them and how to make them more efficient. Make sure the right number of personnel to the right training. Make sure there's no wasteful programs. That's good government. That is not what Elon Musk and his Doge boys are doing. It's nothing like what they are doing. They're just cutting everything because they want to make space with these tax cuts for their billionaire budgets. It's really disgraceful. It's something that I don't quite understand. So over the past 2 months, just the past two months, we've seen horrifying accidents and near misses at airports all across the country. And there was another close call just this past Friday, again, PCA. Many of these accidents have been a result of chronic staffing and antiquated technologies at the FAA. But instead of fixing those problems, the first thing the Trump administration did when it came to power was fire people. I think he's kind of stuck in the loop of The Apprentice. You're fired. You're fired. You're fired. You get it. Like, good government is important, and they support consistency. That's not what they're doing. It's like they're on a power trip, and they just want to fire everybody across the board. So while a board forced the FAA to rehire workers, thank God for the courts. Thank God for the judges that are doing their job jobs and looking at these lawsuits appropriately. Many federal workers have simply moved on and found new jobs because these are highly skilled, highly sought after employees, people that we really want working in the federal government to keep our country safe. Now, just weeks after the horrific plane crash here with 67 people getting killed in Washington, the administration fired hundreds of Federal Aviation Administration employees, jeopardizing the public safety and threatening our national security. So that made no sense. Like, it was right on the heels of some horrific accident that we all witnessed. Now, over 90% of U.S. airport terminal towers don't have enough air traffic controllers. Critical shortages remain for other aviation safety personnel as well, such as safety inspectors and mechanics, because to make sure when we get on that plane, the plane's ready to go. In New York, nearly 40% of positions are unfilled at two facilities on Long Island that direct air traffic for Newark, our shared airport, JFK, and LaGuardia. As a result, over these past few years, the U.S. has experienced a substantial and alarming increase in the number of near misses. According to an analysis from the New York Times, 2023 close calls involving commercial airlines occurred multiple times each week, and the number of significant air traffic control lapses increased 65% over the previous year.
Orbit synchronized.
What did they cite as the major reason behind the increase?
Fake
A
news.
shortage of air traffic controllers. While the Trump administration claims no air traffic controllers or critical safety personnel were fired, we know that many of those who were let go played an essential role in maintaining our air traffic control infrastructure. Others were responsible for maintaining navigational, landing, and radar systems. We also know that safety inspectors, system specialists, maintenance mechanics are among workers who are affected, and at least one of the employees fired worked for FAA's National Defense Program, which protects our airspace from enemy drones, missiles, aircraft, and used as weapons. I want to talk about those missiles and drones as well. I really want to talk to you about what your thinking is here, that we don't have a plan. You had the incursions in New Jersey, incursions in New York at the same time, and we don't have assurance that those drones aren't being operated by China or Russia or Iran or another adversary for a nefarious purpose. We have to get involved with this, and that's something that Senator Booker, you and I have been at the forefront of questioning the administration about what they're doing on this issue. So the question I have is, why did the administration fire these workers and so easily part with them? Who will perform these duties going forward? What risk analysis was performed to ensure this won't make flying less safe? Now, I asked these questions of the Secretary of Transportation in a letter on the 20th, over a month ago, and what was their response? We don't know. They haven't answered my letter. They're not willing to engage, instead in actually policy and decisions that keep our state safe. What's worse is that we don't know if this is where it ends, or if more reductions are coming, and more reductions that allow for safety for our FAA. Now, DOJ's so-called workforce optimization initiative, it's BS. They don't do the analysis first. They just make the cuts. We need the Secretary and the acting FAA administrator to respond to Congress's questions and oversight. The American people deserve to have a federal aviation agency that is dedicated to actually doing the job of protecting us, protecting this country. The Trump administration needs to take immediate steps to address FAA staffing shortages across the entire agency, not just air traffic controllers. So, Senator Booker, the question I really want to ask you is, for your state, for New Jerseyans, what are they thinking? Like, How do they receive this information? What do they say when they read about drone incursions over one of your arsenals, over one of your sensitive military bases? What do they think about cutting staff to the FAA when they watch all this information about crashes? I know my constituents are pretty stressed out about it. They don't understand why someone's making these cuts. Again, the why is the most important question. It's not for efficiency. It's not to get rid of the fat. It's not to get rid of the fraud. Never heard an allegation there's fraud in the FAA. Never heard an allegation there's fat in the FAA. It's been understaffed forever. So they're lying about the purpose. So what is the purpose? What is the purpose? What are they going to do with that money, Senator Booker? I'd like to know.
Well, I appreciate this more than you know. There's a line threaded throughout your entire question about the way they're going about doing this.
Couldn't fix that though, could they?
Agencies. First, they're trying to kill certain agencies, the Department of Education, which they can't legally do. The USAID, they can't legally do. We created that. It's the Article 1 branch of government. But on some of these other agencies, like Social Security, where you started, we know it's ready, fire, aim. And actually, the aim part never happens. They're savagely cutting personnel, and organization after organization, seniors, thousands of them, are already writing in about the undermining of service. The Wall Street Journal article we read last night said that the customer service at Social Security is going from bad to worse, and painted horrific pictures that are putting seniors in crisis. Not to mention the closing of Social Security centers in rural areas where people have to now drive hours and hours and hours. And so the FAA was one of the early outrages that they hired people that they then realized they needed and tried to find some way to pull some of them back. And you and I both know that the way they talk about government workers, a large percentage of them are veterans. The way they demean and degrade them, the way they accuse them of being parts of corruption, fraud, or fact. The stories we've been reading of what some of these folks do is extraordinary. So your question, though, brings up a lot of national security issues. I'm going to bridge to that. Because you and I both were really, really incensed that we weren't getting enough information when we had these incursions. And I want to start what I've been doing in other sections, is just reading, elevating on this floor the voices of people from our country, trying to elevate more of the voices to let people know we see you, we hear you, your outrage, your hurt, your fears, they have value.
Start your letters, Senator Booker, if you'd like to entertain another question, if you'll yield.
I will yield a question, Robert Taney.
Okay. So, because you're going into the national security section, and I want to give you a couple of questions to pepper your answers, because I sit on the Special Committee on Intelligence in the Senate. I also sit on the Armed Services Committee. And so national security is an area where New Yorkers care a deep amount about. And I've been spending the last 15 years focused on how we keep this country safe and what we should be doing. And so I get a lot of questions from New Yorkers about this issue. So I want you to address the drone issue for sure, because that is something you and I have been working on continuously since we've seen these incursions. And just to give a little more context for New Yorkers who might be listening to this debate, we've had drone incursions over sensitive military sites for quite some time now. And it's something that I've been working on a bipartisan basis on through the Intelligence Committee. And some of these incursions are every night, over and over again, over sensitive military bases. There was one over Langley. We've had them over arsenals in New Jersey, over sensitive sites in New York. We've had them over military bases across the country. And, you know, I don't like it when the answer is, oh, we know where most of this is. This is mostly FAA traffic. And I don't like it when I hear it from this administration or any administration, because it's not true. Some of the drone sightings are planes in the air, helicopters, maybe weather balloons, maybe enthusiasts, but they do not know if all are. And in these specific incursions, they do not know the origin of them. They do not know whose they are. They do not know who is operating them. They do not know the purpose of these drones. These drones could easily be spying. They could be planning attacks. They could be doing anything nefarious. We have no basis to say it is all known and we are not concerned. And so this is something we are going to get to the bottom of. I am very incensed about it. It does not leave our personnel as safe. It does not leave our secrets safe. So drones is one issue. The second issue, if you could address on the national security side, is cybersecurity. I think that and election security. One of the cuts that the Doge boys made, which I literally cannot understand why they would ever do this. This is making us weaker. It is making us less safe. It is not good for America, and it shows how ill-advised this process is, how uninformed this process is, and how we can see through these cuts how insincere this process is. This is not about waste. This is not about fraud. This is not about good government. This is about making massive cuts for tax breaks for billionaires, because that is where they want to spend more tax dollars. New Yorkers' tax dollars, New Jerseyans' tax dollars. They want to take it and give it tax breaks to billionaires. Okay, so this is the question. These cuts, they have cut all the personnel, or the main personnel, at an organization called CISA, that were supposed to be doing election security. So the people who actually were working with the states to make sure our election system can't be hacked, they fired those people. They fired the senior personnel at the Department of Defense, our most experienced generals across the board, members from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, just fired them. For what reason? I don't know. No substantive reason was ever given. But these are the senior personnel who actually keep us from wars, who have the judgment and the experience to advise the president, to advise Congress, to advise us on how to keep us safe. And so, and then the last group they cut were the lawyers. Do you remember that Shakespeare play, The First Thing We Do Is Kill All the Lawyers? Well, the context in which that was given was in order to have a coup. So Shakespeare, hundreds of years ago, said, you want to have a coup, the first thing you do is kill all the lawyers. Well, they fired all the lawyers, the senior lawyers at the Department of Defense, the generals who actually know how to keep us safe, and then they fired the personnel at CISA who are responsible for election interference. They fired the people at the FBI who are also responsible for election interference. So again, these firings make no sense. I don't think they're making us less. I don't think they're making us more safe. I think they are making us less safe. When you fire the people who know what they're doing,
where the fuck's my machine gun?
Dedicated to keeping us safe.
How the fuck you get past my machine gun?
What do you think, Senator Booker, about any of the topics that I raised, specifically the drones, the firing of the election protection personnel at CISA, the firing of the generals, the firing of the senior lawyers at the Department of Defense, the firing of the FBI personnel, also expert at election interfering? These are the smartest, most capable, the most sophisticated senior personnel that are there to help us keep this country safe. I really want to hear what you're hearing for your state and what you're thinking about this reckless approach to national security.
I'm so grateful for the questions from my colleague, from my friend. I want folks to know that probably the best dinner I had when I came here was with the senator from New York, who really gave me a quick rundown on how to get things done in this body. I've watched her work on both sides of the aisle relentlessly to get things over the finish line, to help people in our region, from 9/11 folks who were our first responders to get their health care, to fight to support the military, empower the military, to fight against sexual assault in the military. She is one of these phenomenal people, and a lot of the questions we're going to get to, including that question that was obviously painful about national security, is that, like, hey, one of the strategies of Russia, we know this, is to attack elections of other democracies, to try to sow discord, to try to undermine the very voting process. And the Trump administration pulled away a lot of the people, the DOJ and elsewhere, that their sole purpose was to fight against foreign election interference. And so how can we have a nation where the president in charge of national security is not doing things to address the issues that were in your questions? And I want to start by reading a couple of constituent letters. I know we want to step back and talk a little bit about immigration because my colleague and my friend and my partner in leadership in the Senate, Tina Smith, is here. But I want to get into some of these letters because I said over 12 hours ago that we were going to continue to elevate the voices of people out there. And so this is coming from this one, from someone from New Jersey. And they're writing, "Dear Senator Booker, I'm writing to express my deep concern regarding the current state of our nation and the lack of response to the looming constitutional crisis. It is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore the acts of the president who routinely lies and makes outrageous proposals such as annexing Greenland, Mexico, and Panama, or even renaming the Gulf of Mexico. Those proposals not only undermine our international standing, but also disrespect the foundations of our country. Furthermore, I'm alarmed by the growing threat to press freedom. Recently, for example, the European press alarmed the White House simply for referring to the Gulf of Mexico rather than the Gulf of America. A clear sign of the president's disregard for free speech and free press role in holding power accountable. The president is actively trampling on the Constitution and blatantly ignoring the rule of law. I'm saying he has taken steps to slash vital federal institutions and disaster undermining the nation's capacity to respond to crises. His decision to appoint unqualified individuals to high positions for the purpose of following his will is another example of how our democratic systems are being systematically weakened. Additionally, his reckless and irresponsible approach to foreign policy is making the world more dangerous. His insistence on blaming Ukraine for Russia's invasion and ongoing war is not only historically inaccurate, but also deeply damaging for our allies and global stability. Even worse, his administration has entertained so-called, in quotes, peace settlements that exclude Ukraine from the process entirely, effectively allowing Russia to dictate terms without any Ukrainian input. Such actions destroy the democracy and embolden authoritarian regimes worldwide. Domestically, his agenda is destructive. His administration has pursued the withdrawal from USAID, the gutting of critical global humanitarian and development efforts that have long served U.S. interests abroad. At home, he is enabling tech billionaires like Elon Musk to take a chainsaw to government agencies, arbitrarily dismantling institutions that provide essential public services. His attacks on the NIH and its funding jeopardize critical medical research and public health initiatives, undermining scientific progress for purely ideological reasons. Beyond these threats, his treatment of our closest allies is both reckless and embarrassing. His taunting of Canada, whether through inflammatory rhetoric or deliberate policy snubs, weakens our diplomatic ties and disregards the importance of maintaining strong relationships with our neighbors. This petty, short-sighted approach to international relations is beastly in the U.S. at a time when global cooperation is more critical than ever. My greatest frustration, however, is the lack of our representatives and governments. Too many are cowering in fear of the president's authoritarian tactics. I am troubled by the absence of pushback. We are witnessing the erosion of checks and balances, and the consequences could be dire. I was heartened by Governor Janet Mills of Maine standing up to the president's orders. Unfortunately, his response was a threat to her political future, further evidence of the intimidation tactics being employed. I implore you, Senator Booker, to show some moral courage and take meaningful action to stand up to this growing threat to our democracy. Please let me know how you are responding to the situation and what steps you, Senator Booker, are taking to defend our Constitution and the rule of law. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. I hope at this early morning hour at almost 8 o'clock that maybe you are listening, because I hear you, I see you. I'm standing here because part letters like yours. This is not normal. These are not normal times. We must begin to do as John Lewis says, get in good trouble, get in necessary trouble. I want to read another constituent. Just want to see where this person's from. I'm not trying to violate their privacy, as my staff doesn't want me to do. What's that? We know Wisconsin's getting a lot of love here.
Thank you.
I know my colleague. I kept seeing folks from two towns, and one in your state and one in the great state of Pennsylvania. But this person, alas, is from Boise. I wrote to ask you to do all you can to resolve funding for the National Institute of Health and USAID. I work in information technology at Princeton University, and I've seen firsthand the destructive termination of funds.
What? I'll be damned.
It's causing research and education. We are losing the momentum of research.
Damn, Helldivers are tough.
Causing deep and lasting loss of educational resources. The NIH and the National Science Foundation provide funds for basic research as well as applied topics. The benefits of this research will be long-lasting, and the cost disruption will be very high. Similarly, the disruption of USAID is tragic. My daughter works for an organization working with USAID on climate mitigation and adaptation. She has lost job security as a result of the Trump administration's actions. Work she has built on in Ethiopia, Kenya, and elsewhere will be disrupted due to lack of funding. Thank you for your leadership as our senator. I'm proud to be represented by you as well as our new senator, Andy Kim. The promise of our country is great, but we must redefine our purpose and imagine a new future. Your experience and knowledge will be critical to our country's success. I'll look two more and then turn to my colleague. This is a short one. I'm writing to express my concerns about the chaos and lawlessness coming out of the White House. USAID must be restored. Please use powers to restore democracy to the United States of America. This is not what democracy looks like. Thank you. Somebody from New Jersey. And one more voice. As a parent of a USAID Foreign Service officer recently in Ukraine, now in Kenya, I am outraged and horrified by the coup now being staged by Elon Musk under the authority of the president. To be called criminal after putting your life at risk in the service of America's interest is itself to be a victim of criminal-like behavior. I have seen the beautiful roads and railroads in Africa built by Chinese. In one fell swoop, Trump has given that continent to the Chinese and the Russians.
Right.
He did the same thing years ago by canceling participation in the Pacific Free Trade Pact, forfeiting our power and our goodwill, making China the largest player in the region. I saw the goodwill in the eyes of passersby from the Philippines to Georgia to Tajikistan. Now I hear it turn to hostility. Think of sports fans in Canada booing our national anthem. Think also of the infants that will now die from AIDS because of USAID's treatment program was abruptly stopped, along with vaccination programs and programs for stopping diseases such as Ebola, monkeypox, hemorrhagic fever. These diseases will come home. With even a 90-day pause in workers in these programs, we will lose jobs and rent, and some never will return. Refrigeration of medicines will be at risk. Clinics and offices will become unavailable. Humpty Dumpty will not be quickly put back together again. Some of what Trump wants to do will ultimately need approval of Congress. I urge you to fight everyone on this proposal and appointments. Slow the legislative process as much as you can.
Hellpods primed.
Please. I hope Trump will lose his majority. Thank you for your attention. I will be of service in any way possible to right these wrongs. I love when constituents don't only point out what's wrong, but stand up and say, I will be of service. Let me know how I can help. Your voice is helping tonight. Speaking to these issues is helping tonight. I know my Senate colleague is here. If she has a question, I will yield while retaining. I will yield while retaining the floor.
My man. Oof.
Mr. President.
The senator from Minnesota.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to my colleague from New Jersey for yielding for a question. And I want to just start by thanking my colleague for one of my dearest friends in the Senate for using his voice in such a powerful way over the many, many hours that you've been holding the Senate floor. And I know you well enough to know that you are not doing this because of your belief in the power of your voice. You are doing this because of your belief in the power of all the voices that you've been amplifying all through the night. And your belief of the importance that the millions of Americans who are so frightened and concerned and horrified what they see this administration doing and wanting to feel like there is somebody here that is fighting for them and that is listening to them. And the way in which we're reading these letters today all through the night, Senator Booker, I think, is a tribute to the respect for all these Americans. And so I'm so grateful for that. And I wanted to take a moment, if I could, to ask you for a question related to what you've been talking about. You know, and I certainly agree with you that these are not normal times in our nation, and as elected officials, it is our duty to speak up and to fight back against the abuses and the overreach of this administration, and to raise up our voices, raise up the voices of our constituents who, as I said, are both frightened and furious about what's happening. So my question to you, Senator Booker, is about some of the Trump administration's recent actions regarding immigration. And my question is in three parts. First, I think that we can all agree that our current immigration system in this country is broken. It is not working well for anyone. It's not working well for American businesses that depend on a global talent pool. It is not working well for families who want to reunite with their loved ones. And it is not working well at all for those who seek refuge from persecution and believe in the promises that are carved into the Statue of Liberty. And to my colleague, I ask these questions and I think about these issues, about the shortcomings of our immigration system as a senator from Minnesota, where our meat processing sector relies so much on immigrant labor, where the University of Minnesota is a beacon for international students studying science and technology and agriculture, where the resorts in Minnesota rely on folks from all over the country to come and make them work, the little mom and pop 12-cabin operations up on lakes in northern Minnesota, and the manufacturers who rely on, as I said, the best and the brightest from all over the world coming to serve in our state and serving our economy. And I think we know, my colleague from New Jersey, that there have been real and serious bipartisan attempts at comprehensive immigration reform debated in this body. And while I may not have agreed with everything in these proposals, I suspect you might not as well. I think we both, I'm sure, strongly believe that immigration is an issue that merits real debate and real policy solutions. Our colleague who is here on the floor with us this morning, Senator Murphy from Connecticut, has worked so hard to find real bipartisan solutions. And I believe that a comprehensive immigration reform needs to ensure our national security. It needs to provide a fair and workable path for immigrants who want to come and contribute to the American dream which is what truly makes this country great. But here's the rub. The Trump administration's recent actions show that they are not interested in serious policy reforms that would make Americans safer or make our immigration system work more efficiently and fairly. Instead, what I think we can see, this president has prioritized using our immigration system as a tool to restrict First Amendment freedoms, to subvert due process, and to further weaken America's global standing with our allies and our regional partners as he seeks to emulate the authoritarian regimes that he so openly admires. There's just one example. In recent weeks, we've seen a number of international students targeted for arrest and deportation merely on the basis of their pro-Palestinian advocacy. Now, these are young people who played by all the rules. They've entered this country with permission in order to further their educations and have not been accused of or charged of any criminal activity. Their views on the war in Gaza may differ sharply from mine, but I believe the First Amendment guarantees them the right to express those views and punishment or removal from our government. Nonetheless, the Trump administration has admitted that they are doing exactly that, seeking to punish lawfully present immigrants, in some cases even green card holders, because of the political views that they've expressed. The Secretary of State has invoked a rarely used section of statute that allows him to unilaterally designate for removal any alien who may cause, and I quote, potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences. But that's not enough. Many of these arrests have been carried out in seats calculated to maximize fear and intimidation in immigrant and activist communities. Here's an example to my colleague for him to respond to. Take the case of the recent arrest of Rümeysa Özerkök, a Turkish graduate student at Tufts University, who was studying the relationship between child development and our social media saturated, globally connected world. She is here on a valid student visa. She is not accused of any crime. And by all accounts, she is a loved and valued member of the Tufts community. Her only purported offense was being one of 4 co-authors of a student newspaper that urged the administration of Tufts to engage with student home to prevent the businesses of ties to Israel and the IDF. And for that offense, her visa was revoked with no notice, and she was arrested on the street and spirited more than 1,500 miles away, which is likely a violation of the judge's order to await her probable deportation. And I'm sure many of my colleagues, including my colleague from New Jersey, has seen the video of her arrest, which was captured by a neighbor's security camera, and it is utterly chilling. She is surrounded by officers in plain clothes with no visible insignia, no markings at all on their clothing. She is handled roughly. Her belongings are taken away from her. Hands are cuffed before being loaded into an unmarked car. And it is no exaggeration that her arrest looks like a kidnapping, one that you might expect to see in Moscow rather than in the streets of Boston. And of course,
where?
The terror of what she experienced is horrible to think of happening, one that you might expect to see in Moscow rather than in the streets of Boston. And of course,
damn, that's embarrassing. Ow.
Is horrible to think about, but I also think about the thousands and thousands and thousands of other students here with a student visa or other, and other lawful means who see this and think to themselves,
Good throw.
This could be something that happens to my roommate or my student or anybody. It seems like such a break
The hell?
in the rule of law, the way that the country should operate. So I'd like to ask my colleague, does this seem normal or appropriate for federal law enforcement officers of the United States to conduct routine arrests in plain clothes with unmarked cars and with this overwhelming
In Boston.
show of force?
Oh, shameful. I'm sorry.
Physical threat to those law enforcement. And I mean, furthermore, is this not exactly the sort of operation that you would order if your goal is to intimidate and dissuade immigrant and activist communities from
I don't know. They're doing good.
their constitutional rights to free speech? Does punishing people for their political speech seem consistent with American democratic values? I can't believe that we would think that it would be consistent. And I wonder if my colleague from New Jersey would like to respond in any way to this.
There's something here.
I want to thank my colleague for being here in the morning. She's one of my colleagues I confided in when I told her sort of I was enough for me. I needed to do something different, and she readily encouraged me to be here on the floor for what is now about 13 hours. And she has encouraged me. She has encouraged my heart, and is just one of my dear friends. And I'm just so grateful to see her this morning. I want to say something before I begin answering her question. In my home county, the one I grew up in, Bergen County, there's a family, the Alexanders, whose son, Idan, is an American who is being held by Hamas. And he is being likely tortured and in trauma and pain. He's a U.S. citizen. He's an American. I had a friend give me this recently. A man who was driving me around this ribbon that I will often use to keep in my pocket and remind me of him and our determination to bring him home. Bring him home. I want his family to know that stays centered in my thoughts. And I also feel, because of so many New Jerseyans who are affected by this crisis, who have lost family members in that region, that we must bring peace. And then my friend, Senator Smith, asked this question about, which is a real test, because when you disagree with someone's statements so much, but the very nature of the First Amendment, what makes this document so precious is that it says that no matter how reprehensible your speech is, this document says you have the right to say it. I remember the controversy over NFL players kneeling. And one of the voices that just sticks in my hand is a man who was a white guy from the military who just said, I fought battles, I think it was Afghanistan, and I am offended by his staking a knee. But the very reason I fought was so that he would have the freedom to do it. Deploying equipment package. And so I came back. I was there on October 7th, and I have very hurt, strong feelings about what's going on over there. Urgent desires to end the nightmare, to bring people like Idan home, to end the nightmare for so many Israelis and Palestinians. And I find some of the things people are saying so unhelpful to the crisis and to the moral truths that I believe in. But I will fight for people's rights. So here is a situation where you see video and it just doesn't seem like who we are. If you're revoking somebody's visa, make a phone call, tell them that you have 30 days to leave. But there should be due process. You should have to prove your claims in court. If this person is somehow aligned with some kind of enemy, prove it. But what I saw there doesn't reflect the highest ideals. God, if this Constitution was me, it wouldn't be worth the paper it's written. And so I love my friend because she wades into some difficult waters, but she's guided by the oath that she took to defend the Constitution. And in these complex and difficult times, she's standing up. And I tell you, when we were in the immigration section last night, or earlier, I should say, we
no need for that.
Read the most painful stories. My brother over on the other side of me, I've got some of my really dear friends on the floor right now, Senator Murphy, Senator Warnock, Senator Smith. My brother, Senator Warnock, knows that we are a nation that is paying hundreds of dollars over the years of the Trump administration to fund private prisons that are being paid, incentivized to take away people's liberties. We read stories in the immigration section about people that got trapped in systems that should never be there. Horrible stories, painful voices I've read about folks who were caught up in a system. And I just loved that one article from that Canadian that was for weeks put in a private prison. And suddenly, when she heard the lies of the people who found ways to keep her there, the aha moment that she realized that these people, every day I'm there, they get profit. They're not incentivized by justice, they're incentivized by profit. I read stories, Senator Smith, of people that were sent to that horrible jail in El Salvador that the government admitted they made a mistake. They disappeared someone who has American family members. Story after story I read that just are such a betrayal, not of democratic values, but of American values. Because we all in this body know we need to do more to protect our borders,
Mission accomplished without a single
keep us safe, to arrest criminals, be they undocumented or documented. That's an urgency we all feel. But when you sacrifice your core values and you sacrifice them to a demagogue who says, this is all about your safety.
Let the enemy feel the wrath of liberty.
When you sacrifice your core principles for your safety, you will achieve neither. You will either be safe
Hellpods Prime. Engaging orbital
or morally strong. The true leaders on both sides of the aisle that I've heard over the years from the say, we can do both. We can abide by our values, and in a complex world where country after country disappears people, an authoritarian country disappear their political enemies, their political adversaries, disappear people who say things they politically disagree with, those countries are looking to us. Did you know when Donald Trump started using that phrase, fake news, fake news, fake news, that in Turkey, Erdogan started arresting people on charges of fake news? Because we are looked to. We, like Reagan said, we could be that city on a hill, but we are high and folks are going to look to us. But what is the world order going to be? What is democracy globally going to look like? Are we going to defend democracy and democratic principles, or will we behave like the authoritarians that we should be against? So this is a fundamental question you ask, and it has been resonating.
Always a fucking rock in front of my target.
So much what the administration are doing.
Not the worst.
The separation of powers, just violating the very first words of our Constitution. The very first words, this commitment we make when we...
Well, this is just one, maybe.
We, the people of the United States of America...
Yeah. Is that it?
This is our mandate. In order to form a more perfect union,
oh, wait, there's one.
establish justice. It comes really quick. It comes really quick. Is it just to disappear a human
usually.
being, no due process? I quoted Anton Scalia, this conservative that was sitting on a stage with somebody he had a lot of affection for, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and the moderator asked them, does somebody in our country have the rights of this document? And he said, yes.
That's a long way.
Especially the 14th Amendment, it doesn't say any citizen, it says no person, no body. So where do we stand? When our founders, those imperfect geniuses, say we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, we the people, the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity. What nation are we turning over to the next president, to the next Congress, when this Congress
Next
is
president.
sacrificing
We're gonna have another
the
president?
powers that are given right underneath that preamble is Article 1, which spells out all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in the Congress of the United States, which shall consist of the Senate and the House of Representatives. And then it goes on to talk about what we have the power to do. We set the laws. This president is invoking emergency powers under the Alien Insurrection Act. 1790, 1780 something law that the last time was used in World War II to detain Japanese Americans, something so shameful, to put them in concentration camps here in America. He wants to take power from our Congress, and the thing that is killing me, that is actually breaking my heart, Brother Warnock, the thing that's actually breaking my heart is that we're letting that.
Mm-hmm.
That we're letting him take our power. If Elon Musk was a Democrat and Joe Biden said, hey, go after the spending power of Congress, all the things that they approved, it's hard to do bipartisan things here. God bless Patty Murray and Susan Collins coming together and getting spending bills, hard work, hard done. Lord knows, I sometimes play a little Motown in here, ain't too proud to beg, go to the appropriations leader and say, hey, my New Jersey into this county needs this county. We work on all these, this. I fight for programs with Lindsey Graham, USAID with now Secretary of State Marco Rubio, programs that he approved.
No, I didn't.
The Department of Education, I've worked with Republicans that put things in. Department of Education, there are people here that worked in a bipartisan way to try to simplify the FAFSA form. I could go through all the work we've done that now this body, the Article 1 branch of Constitution, right under the mandate of the United States of America, Tina Smith is telling us, right after we, the people of the United States, in order to form a perfect union, establish justice. The senator, my friend, and so that's why we're here. That's why now the Senate is filling up with friends galore. We got Amy Klobuchar now on the floor. That's why we're here. No business as usual. No business as usual. We're not doing the usual order. We're talking about these things. We're making the case. We talked about immigration. We talked about Medicaid. We talked about Medicare. We talked about health care. We talked about medical research. We talked about Social Security. We're marching through. 13 hours. I got more in the tank.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thank you for that question. It brings up very emotional things for me, I'll be honest. It brings up pain and frustration and hurt. It brings up the pain of so many New Jerseyans that have reached out, the Palestinian doctors in my state who worked with my office to get Palestinian babies into America for care. It brings up the hurt of being there and seeing the worst slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. So many things are painful, but if we sacrifice our values, it reminds me of the mosque being built. 9/11. It reminds me of all these difficult points, the marchers in Skokie, KKK, all these difficult points where the values of this Constitution were tested, where we were being measured. But I have to say, what this president is doing with the Alien Insurrection Act, what this president is doing with no due process, what this president is doing with flushing the Department of Education, with getting rid of the USAID, with attacking thousands of people that serve our veterans, that serve our Social Security, those things should be obvious to the institutions, to the Senate, that that's wrong. That they have unelected, the biggest campaign donor, unelected, who's getting our personal information, and there's no transparency. Nobody can say they know what information, confidential information Elon Musk has, and knows what they do, because they were brought in here to answer for it. So I I thank my colleague for the question, and I know Reverend Warnock is going to ask me one. I just want to take a couple pages into this for a second. The American people alone, our approach to foreign policy practiced by the president, what the president has done is left our allies feeling abandoned, feeling degraded and insulted. He's left our adversaries feeling emboldened, and has done things that has hurt our national security, that has made Americans less safe. In the short time President Trump has been in office for his second term, Americans have already been put in harm's way because of the reckless approach of the administration. It all begins, in fact, with his extremely poor judgment. This administration has prioritized the obsequiousness to Donald Trump over the expertise when it comes to some of the most important national security jobs, and it has sidelined dedicated professionals who devoted their lives to keeping our country safe. This administration has also demonstrated an inability to distinguish between America's adversaries and America's allies. And the disturbing failure to understand how America's partnerships and investments abroad to protect and benefit communities here reminded of General Mattis to say, if you're cutting things like the USAID or the State Department, buy me more bullets. But this is something that folks on the floor have talked about. I see one of my friends and my somebody I really look up to. I see Tim Kaine, who sits a little bit higher up on the dais than me on the Foreign Relations Committee, somebody I turned to many times. And he was astonished by this. And I know he, like me, has had private conversations with our Republican colleagues about this. But this body has not called for one hearing or one investigation, no accountability. What am I talking about? It's when last week we learned Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, Director of CIA John Ratcliffe, Trump's National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, Special Envoy for the Middle East Steve Witkoff, and several other high-ranking officials in the Trump administration discussed attack plans against the Houthis in Yemen in a group chat over the commercial messaging app Signal. We learned of this because the president's national security advisor mistakenly invited
the freedom of the
editor in chief of the Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, on the text chain. And after Jeffrey Goldberg published a story describing this jaw-dropping national security failure, where they could have broken at least two laws that I'm aware of, just by doing that, the preservation of public records, all the way to disclosing national security, highly classified information. The president and his cabinet members didn't step up and say we made mistakes, didn't step up and say this is clearly, abjectly wrong, didn't step up and say there will be accountability, didn't step up and say we'll take action. No, what they decided to do when they were exposed is actually target the reporter with a barrage of insults and not acknowledging any wrongdoing. Unsurprisingly, the Trump team's response led Jeffrey Goldberg to publish the rest of the Signal chat messages, which exposed more administration lies. We're going to go into that, but I really want to turn to my brother. And I said earlier about Senator Murphy's speech, one of my favorite I've ever heard when I was in the Senate. Brother Warnock gave a speech that was one of my favorites in the Senate too, when he talked about this being January 5th America, and that fateful day, January 6th. He has been a friend of mine for a long time, and I think he might be the only person in the body. He started this talk 13 hours ago by talking about getting into good trouble. I think there might be the only person in this body that was arrested in this building for protesting before he came to serve in this building as a United States Senator. I'm going to stick to what I'm told to say.
There's something here.
If you ask me that you'd like to speak, you have to say it. I'd like to ask you a question. I think that's how this goes. Why, yes, I will yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Well, good morning, and let me just say, Cory Booker, how very, very proud I am. It's a real honor to serve in this body. I know that all of my colleagues who are here agree that it's an honor for the people of your state to say that when we take stock of all the issues that we wrestle with, if we look into the eyes of our children and consider what we want for them, and in the eyes of our aging parents as they deal with the blessings and the burdens of getting older. But since all of us can't go to Washington, we're going to send you. We're going to trust that in rooms of power, where decisions are being made, that you're going to settle the extraction shuttle awaits your request. You're going to be thinking about ordinary people. And so, Cory Booker, I want to thank you for holding this. I'm prepared to ask you a question. I just want to thank you for holding vigil for this country all night. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said that when he marched with Dr. King, he felt like his legs were praying. So in a very real sense, your legs have been praying. As you've been standing on this floor all night. And thank you for praying not just with your lips, but with your legs.
That was trash.
For a nation in need of
Jetpacking.
I just got off a prayer call that I do every Tuesday morning at 7:14 a.m. 2 Chronicles 7:14, just by people who are called by my name, would humble themselves and pray. If they would seek my face, turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, I will forgive their sins and heal the land. The nation needs healing. And we need spiritual healing, we need moral healing. But literally, there are people all across our country who need healing, who need health care. And so that's why I was so proud to come to the Senate after being arrested in the Rotunda a few years before that. Proud to join you in the Senate. Proud that we were able to pass, just a couple months after I got here, the American Rescue Plan, which did so much incredible work. In that American Rescue Plan, there was the expanded child tax credit, literally cut child poverty more than 40% in our country. I wish we could get it extended. One of the other things we did was we lowered Georgians and Americans' health care premiums by hundreds of dollars on average. We passed a tax cut, and that's so relevant in this moment because that's what this body is prepared to do right now, I guess, in the next few days. Pass the tax cut, but that tax cut is literally going to be for the richest of the rich, the wealthiest among us. But we passed a tax cut that brought health care into reach. Tens of thousands of Georgians and millions of Americans in the American Rescue Plan. These tax credits are so critical that the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office said that the number of Americans without health care would grow by 3.8 million people in just 1 year if the premium subsidies were allowed to expire. Forgive me for my phone ringing. My 8-year-old and 6-year-old are calling me. They're not impressed with what I'm doing. They're not impressed. But we know that this would impact thousands of Georgians who've only recently been able to receive health care. So we passed in that American Rescue Plan tax credits which put health care in reach. And now they're set to expire if we don't do our work. And that's why what you're doing, Cory Booker, is holy work. It's within a political context, but this is holy work. $62,000 annual income would see premiums go up about $414 a year. A 60-year-old couple in Georgia with an $80,000 annual income would see premiums go up by a staggering $18,157 a year. Think about that. Nearly 1/3 of Americans have less than $500 in savings in their bank account. Imagine the health care cost for a 60-year-old couple going up by more than $18,000. Health insurance premium hike like this would be more than an inconvenience. It wouldn't just be a nuisance. It's literally the difference between having health care coverage and not having health care coverage. So I'm thinking about people like that. And I'm thinking about my constituent Cassidy from Bainbridge, Georgia. She wasn't able to afford health care on the Affordable Care Act marketplace until the premium tax credit brought health care into reach. Shortly after she became insured, she severely cut her hand, landed her in the emergency room with 35 stitches. With insurance, it still cost her about $300. Had it not been for the tax credit that allowed her to get health care, she could have been in financial ruin. She's one of the hundreds of thousands of Georgians at risk of losing their coverage if these tax credits are applied. If we don't do our work. We're more focused on the wealthiest of the wealthy rather than the concerns of ordinary people. Should Democrats and Republicans come together to extend premium tax credit for hard-working folks in New Jersey and in Georgia? What do you think?
These 13 hours, yes, they should. I was talking in the healthcare section about while there's a big issue that should be during about $880 billion for Medicaid, cutting all of that out to give the wealthiest, as you said, God bless them. They don't need our help. They don't need more tax cuts to give them tax cuts and explode deficit. This is literally taking from working Americans. The letters we read, the voices of Americans, the fear, the anguish, the hurt, the worry, people who were suffering from Parkinson's, who had children with disabilities, who had elder parents living with them. So many people telling them not $880 billion for aid to state, that their whole financial well-being was hanging on a thread and just cutting the transportation program involved. But I said, while all that was going on, the Trump administration was doing other things to attack ACA enrollment, to attack the tax credits that people are relying on, doing other things to drive up costs. I know some of my colleagues were on the floor, like Amy Klobuchar. We centered the lowering of drug costs, and he is doing things to drive out-of-pocket costs up. There's a cruelty in that. And that was the flag and the thread. My brother, my friend, and born on ship, which is a lot.
Hold on here. The fuck?
I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was sick. What were you? I was in prison, and you came to visit me, and someone asked, Lord, when were you sick? When were you in prison? When were you an undocumented immigrant? Yeah. And the answer comes, inasmuch as you've done it to the least of these, you've done it also unto me. Another part of that text says, and when you don't do it for the least of
Sorry.
these, the scripture says that the one who gives to the poor lendeth to the Lord. This is holy word.
Sir, my friend, I don't understand how a nation could allow a president to be so cruel that he would take away health care from people struggling with children that are facing the worst of health challenges, people who have a spouse, like the person who wrote me. No, it wasn't the spouse. She wrote me herself. She had Parkinson's. I got upset because that's how my father died, and I watched for year after year after year how it affected my family, how it demanded from my mother, how it cost thousands of dollars for his care. And thank God we had the privilege that this person was writing because they were afraid and they didn't what the costs would be. How can our country say that kind of cruelty? How can a nation where the majority of its people are people of faith, be they Muslim or Jain or Baha'i or Hindu or Jewish, how can the central precept of our country, founded on principles that are reflected in the good book, how can we say that we should cut health care from the sick and the needy to give bigger tax cuts to Elon Musk? I will yield to you, my brother, while retaining the poor.
You know, this is the reason why
He's a poor South African.
Every weekend when I leave here, I return not only to Georgia, but I return to my pulpit. Some folks ask, well, I will continue to lead Ebenezer Church. I return to my pulpit every Sunday because, notwithstanding wonderful people like you, I don't want to spend all my time talking to politicians. I'm afraid I might actually. So I want to connect and check in with ordinary folks because I was focused on this healthcare issue long before I came to the Congress. Dr. King said that of all the injustices, inequality in healthcare, he said, is the most shocking and the most inhumane.
Pastor, I read that last night.
The most shocking and the most inhumane. And it's the reason why, as a pastor, inspired by Dr. King,
Man, I can put this all
leading the congregation that Dr. King led, way back in 2014, when the Affordable Care Act was passed, were you here? You came after. I came after. You came right after that. I got arrested in the governor's office in Georgia fighting for health care.
I'm arrested, man.
I got a long record, brother. But all for good trouble. Good trouble. For good trouble. Good trouble. Good trouble. And we had a 1960 sit-in the governor's office. Waves of us got arrested. They arrested one wave, and then another wave came, and another wave came. And we were trying to get Georgia to expand Medicaid.
Yes, I remember that.
We passed the Affordable Care Act here, but Georgia was digging in its heels and saying, no, we're not going to expand Medicaid. And so when I got here,
300 meters. Requesting vehicle.
Senator Klobuchar, I made it a priority of mine to get incentives for Georgia to expand Medicaid. And you remember, I went to our caucus and I said, look, Georgia and about 10 other states have not expanded. They should have done it a long time ago. Let's see if we can make it even easier for them. And as a freshman senator, I was able to convince our caucus to give $14.5 billion for non-expansion states, which includes $2 billion just for Georgia to incentivize Medicaid expansion. Why? So that working people in the gap, people who literally go to work every day, can get health care. Georgia's left that $2 billion sitting on the table and almost 600,000 Georgians in the gap. The governor's plan has literally enrolled a whopping 6,500 people in health care. So we've got nearly 600,000 people in the gap. And this is not This is not theoretical stuff. I mean, every time I talk about this, I have to talk about Heather Payne. Because Heather Payne is a resident of Dalton, Georgia. She spent her career taking care of others. She's a traveling nurse. Heather worked throughout COVID as an ER and labor and delivery nurse, yet often she did not have health care coverage herself because she fell into the health care coverage gap. Sometimes she had health insurance coverage, sometimes she didn't. She made too much money to qualify for Medicaid, but the only coverage options available to her were unaffordable, costing anywhere between $500 and $1,000 a month. And so about 2.5 years ago, Heather Payne, traveling nurse, noticed that something was wrong in her body. And even though she noticed that something was wrong, she literally had to wait for months before she could see a doctor to save up the money. And then she finally went and saw a neurologist who said, you know what, you've actually had a series of strokes. And even after getting that diagnosis, she had to put off serious medical procedures because she cannot work as an ER nurse anymore and is still waiting to get approved for disability so she can get Medicaid coverage. So this nurse who has spent her whole life healing other people can't get health care. The thing is wrong that in the richest country on earth, we don't want to lower the cost of health care for people who are working hard in our communities every day, literally keeping us healthy. I'm going to ask you another softball question, Senator Booker. Should people like my friend Heather Payne have access to affordable health care? In the first few months of the Trump administration, it's been clear that this administration is not working for ordinary people.
Just to try to stay in the parliamentary loan, I yield for a question while retaining the floor. I yield for another question while retaining the floor.
The administration is working for billionaires. They're working for people like Elon Musk. Healthcare is a human right.
Sending in an eagle.
Healthcare is basic. And while we're speaking about health, we've got to cheer on our federal workers who are keeping us healthy. And there are folks in this administration who say that they want to make them the villains. That's what Russell Vogt said, that when they wake up in the morning, we want them to not go to work. Our federal workers, because they are increasingly viewed, he said, as villains. I got news for Russell Vogt. The people who staff our VA hospitals are not villains. The people who keep our food safe and our water clean are not villains. The people who keep our military bases operating are not villains. And so we stand with them in this moment because they are indeed keeping all of us healthy. And so in closing, and nobody believes the Baptist preacher when he says in closing, let me say that, again, you're doing holy work here, brother, by holding this floor. You are literally holding vigil for our nation. We are beset by the politics. Scripture tells us that perfect love casts out all fear. We are witnessing again this ugly game, the politics of us and them. And there are a lot of folks who, because so much of what has been going on in our nation across Republican and Democratic administrations, let's be honest, has not been working for ordinary people. The gap have not got larger and larger, and when people are vulnerable, sometimes they give in to the politics of fear, somebody telling them that they've got all the answers. And so we saw this in this last cycle. We're seeing it in this moment in our country, the politics of us and them. And sadly, hardworking, working class people are waking up this morning and they're discovering that they thought they were in the us. And they're discovering that they're in the them, that the them is larger than they thought. And so we got a whole vigil for each other, for workers, for women, for immigrants, for immigrant families, for our sisters and our brothers, red, yellow, brown, black, and white, for the aging who need Social Security, for the working poor who need Medicaid, for those who are seeking asylum and they just need a dignified path. Those who've been working here for years and they need a dignified path to citizenship. We got a whole vigil for each other. And so thank you for this work. This is not the end, but the beginning. The struggle continues. Dr. King said that the true measure of a person is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in moments of challenge and controversy. So thank you for praying for this nation with your lips and with your legs. I'm going to ask you one last question. Do you intend to keep praying?
Amen. Hallelujah. Yes, I do. Thank you for that question. I know there's going to be a question coming to me. I just want to say, pray Isaiah 40:31 for me. I think you know what that is.
Got it. I'm going to ordain this man.
All right. Article I was going to start reading.
Senator Booker.
I yield for a question while retaining the floor. If the senator has a question, I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
So you'll yield for a question?
Yes, while retaining the floor, yes.
Very good. I want to, first of all, thank you. Thank you for waking us up this morning, literally. All night, as Reverend Warnock would tell you, I know you were in here doing your work, but it was raining, it was thunder, it was really bad. And then when we woke up this morning, you were still talking. You were still talking and the sun was out, giving people hope. When I think about what you're doing, you're like an alarm clock right now for this country. And slowly but surely, we've seen people realize this isn't just about the campaign rhetoric that's going on. This is actually happening. And people are stepping up. They're fighting it in the courts. They're fighting it in Congress with what you're doing today, with what, you know, last week when the horrible news that the Defense Secretary of the United States was using an unauthorized line to just talk with his friends like he was spiking a football about putting the lives of service members at risk. People stood up. Democrats stood up. They have to come. And one of the things that bothers me is that it is so hard to see your way out. A lot of people feel like we're just following right now. But what you're telling us today is another way. Because if we just swallow, these guys are going to continue to cut kids' cancer treatment. If we just swallow, they're going to cut Medicaid when 1 out of 2 seniors in my state who are in assisted living are on Medicaid. They're going to continue to mess around with these tariffs, which really are national sales tax, something like $2,500 for every single family. They are going to continue to be callous. Did someone say to me last night, do they care? Do they care when those U.S. aid workers who devoted their lives to feeding the hungry around the world, when they have to stand outside their building and want to literally take the name of their life work off the brick on that building? Do they care? And one of the things that we have done, the Democrats have done, has stood up. And what is coming upon us in these next few weeks is this that basically will give billionaires tax cuts on the backs of regular people, ransacking the government, messing around how he gets the death benefit. Why did this thing jet show up at his door? He's trying to do the right thing.
Destroyer has left squadron.
He sends an email, no one writes it back. He drives into Brainerd, Minnesota, 30-mile drive. He's like 80 years old. He drives in there.
Decide upon
and then
which
they finally help him. Then
you
he
shall
gets back
spread
and something else goes
liberation.
wrong. Then he tries to call again. Finally ends up at our door, at our office, and we figure it out for him. There's 70-some million people that's going to happen to. These guys don't get their act together. So it's a real good question, do they care? But when we have this tax bill coming up in front of us in these next few weeks, I think people got to understand what's going on.
Orbital blockade doesn't work on this planet. But then again, you can't actually put it on the planet.
People making over $400,000 a year, like Elon Musk, that don't need it. And so
That's not fair.
That's in the hands of the Republicans right now. If just 2 or 3 of them stood up on the House floor and did what you did, Senator Booker, who they said no, and if 4 of them in the United States Senate, 4 of them stood up, 4 senators stood up, then we could have the discussion about, okay, let's make our
Operation
but let's not do it on the backs of regular people. Let's not do it on the backs of kids that are in cancer research, veterans who are trying to simply get their welfare benefits because they put their lives on the line in the field. Let's not do it on the backs in Minnesota and Georgia who simply have these small farms and they're trying to get by, and then suddenly, wham, Donald Trump decides, shock and awe, let's do a tariff and let's get mad at all our allies across the country like Canada. Oh, that's a good idea. Those are the things that they're doing. So my question of you is, how many people need to stand up in the U.S. Senate to make this happen? Because I know Democrats are united. I know we're all standing up. Tell me how many people stand up on the other side. If they stood up and joined you, what is your principle thing?
So I want to thank the Senator for the question. And when I think of people who stand in adversity, I still see you standing in a snowstorm. The strength that you've had is you stood up to fight for affordable health care, stood up and fought for affordable prescription drugs, stood up and fought for farmers and police officers and for communities. You are that kind of person that gives me strength that I've learned so much from. And you have brought this issue up. What you just said on the floor to let you know this is not performative for her. She has brought this up in our small meetings with Chuck Schumer. She has brought this up in our caucus meetings. I've seen her talk about it in her own state. This question of what will it take? Here's something that pains me to hear. That Elon Musk is calling Republicans up and saying, if you take this stand, I'm going to put $100 million in a primary against you. That they are bullying people who dare to stand up and say, maybe this appointee is not the most qualified person you could find to lead this cabinet position, or maybe it's wrong to cut this agency that we together created in Congress. There are people who are asking those questions, but we have seen them get dragged through X mob attacks when it comes to their virtual presence and threaten the primary. But we know, because you're somebody who works on both sides of the aisle, that there are really good people of conscience on both sides of the aisle. And as the great pastor said, there are enough sins in this body to go around for all of us. But this is not a partisan moment. It is a moral moment. This is not a left or right moment. It is a right or wrong moment. We have a president that is shredding the very agencies that Americans who are struggling are relying on. Working people that over the last 71 days are finding higher prices, that are finding housing prices go up. Farmers in my state too, it's our 4th largest industry. I've had farmers who'll come to me as far away as Texas and tell me that they're clawing back these contracts that we've already relied on to buy things already, and now you're putting me in a situation where I might lose my farm. You see veterans who come to our offices. I know they come to your office, Senator Klobuchar. You're a senator from Minnesota, but you are a national figure, so I know they're coming to your office, and they're saying things to me like, "I'm a veteran. I could go to other jobs. I wanted to work on suicide prevention and mental health issues, and I'm being fired. And you said it right. I've heard you say it in private. I've heard you say it in public. I know it hurts you. Because you're one of these balanced people. Okay, we have a big deficit. That is a real problem. Maybe they're trying to lower the deficit. But they're not. That's the irony. They're not. They're about to explode trillions of dollars, most of which disproportionately will go to the wealthiest people, as you've been pointing out in our private phone call over and over again, Senator Klobuchar. So your question to me is spot on. It's spot on. And it's why I am standing here right now on the top of another hour, because of what you are saying relentlessly, persistently, and unyieldingly. Why are we hurting Americans from our farmers? We just talked about rural hospitals here for about 20, 30 minutes and what the threats are to them. We talked about rural social security centers and the threats that are to them. We talked about communities all over our country who are being hurt. And your question, why you give tax breaks that will disproportionately go to the wealthiest Americans who you and I are not those people that demonize wealth. We don't demonize success. I want more people to start business. I want more people to dream of moving on up like the Jeffersons. I want more people to have that vision. I am not one of those people that are going to be mad at you because you're very successful. I'm going to be one of those people that says, you don't need more tax cuts. And we as a society have an obligation to each other, to those farmers, to those rural folks, to the cops I stood with at the funeral of one of their colleagues in Newark 2 weeks ago. We have an obligation to them to help them get equipment to protect themselves. This country cannot do something that is so monumentally, fiscally irresponsible. Who was the one person in the House that voted, a Republican that voted against a guy named Massey? And I watched, I had to smile and laugh because he said the quiet part out loud. He's sitting there looking at something. I saw him in an interview, and he said, by their own numbers, this doesn't add up. They're adding to our deficit by the trillions. He stayed true to his principles. What happened to all those mighty deficit hawks in the House of Representatives on the Republican side that caved to the pressure of a president?
There's something here.
So happy you asked it in the right fashion. I'm yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Very good. That was perfect. So, one of the things you talked about was just this deficit and what's happening and what we see with their proposal right now that's going to come right before us. By some estimates, it's going to add $37 trillion. $37 trillion in 30 years as we go ahead. I mean, I literally cannot believe that, when in fact we can step back now. We can say, what things can we do? What things can we do on the tax code? Because there's a whole lot of things we can do to strengthen Social Security, strengthen what we have. What really, when you step back and look at the economy, the other day on a business channel, just about a month or two ago, man, we were coming out strong. We are a country that came out of the pandemic in a stronger way than so many other countries did around the world. We're ready. Inflation was at least steady, and it was starting to come down here. And now all of a sudden, we see chaos is up, corruption is up, and yes, costs are up. Ask anyone at the grocery store. And one of the problems when you look at what we could be doing to address the debt is that proposals out there are just going to make it worse. It means more interest payments. It means more interest payments on the regular people. That means less we can do to help them. We look at what's happening right now. And one of the things you raised, Senator Booker, which I appreciate how much you know about this, is just this prescription drug negotiation and Medicare. So what do we do? So this case before you, Senator Murphy, or Senator Warren, this place, they made a sweetheart deal with the pharmaceutical companies, and they actually baked in so that they didn't have to negotiate prices for 73 million people and anything. They could just charge whatever they want for these prescription drugs. What happens? Well, guess what happens? Suddenly, the drugs for seniors are 2 to 1, what they are in places like Canada, neighbor, friend. 2 to 1, what they are over there. People driving up to Canada from Minnesota because we can see Canada from our border, and they are going up there trying to get less expensive drugs. And then they say, well, what's going on? So a whole bunch of people started to say, let's look at this. It took years to get this done. Finally, we passed a bill with Berlin that said they've got to negotiate. And we took the first hit drugs. The administration got to pick those drugs, and they picked blockbuster drugs. Drugs like drugs like Xarelto, drugs like Januvia, Jardiance. I memorize them because I can always find people that take them. I don't make them raise their hand and say they take them. But these are blockbuster drugs. And they reduced the price 70% for our seniors. That's going to kick in soon. Now, if this administration messes it up, and from we have seen from everything from giving signal lines about secret battle plans to reporters to deciding they're going to shut down the people that worked on protecting our nuclear facilities, and we made a mistake. Or they said, okay, we want to do something about avian flu. We're going to fire all the people that work at no, we're going to fire them back. We're going to hire them back. That's what's going on right now. So when I look at this really complicated prescription drug negotiation where you're taking on some of the biggest companies in the world, look at I say to myself, okay, so our Secretary of Health, Kennedy, he won't even agree, and when he's asked under oath if he's going to keep this up, they fired against people that would work, showed they're going to keep this negotiation going. Meanwhile, we've got put in place a $2,000 cap for seniors out of pocket on drug costs under Medicare. That's really good. We put in place that insulin limit on $35 a month, and we thank Reverend Warnock, and we thank you, Senator Booker, Senator Murphy, everyone that worked on that. We got that in place. So now we got the big thing, which is the negotiation. 15 more drugs will come in their way for negotiation. Again, blockbuster drugs, Ozempic, blockbuster drugs. Those drugs are coming their way for negotiation, but they have not committed to do it. They have not committed to do that. And even if they did commit to do it, do they even have the people to negotiate to take on these major companies? So my question of you, Senator Booker, after being up all night, after getting us through the storm of last night and into the bright sunshine of today, after holding the floor all this time, I can't even imagine how much your feet must hurt, but those feet hurting is nothing compared, which is why you're doing it, to how the rest of the people in this country right now feel they're hurting. My question is, how can they move forward without trying to save money for the people of this country? Because what I see happening, and there's so many signs, you see it every single day, when they are getting rid of some of these people that work on it, then you're not going to be able to get the Social Security for my friend that I met from Cross Lake, Minnesota. You're not going to be able to get that stuff done. I think we look at those cuts, it's not just the word cut. What effect does it have on real people when they can't get their services, when our veterans, who also have complex ways they've got to deal with them, they have no one answering them, and they've gotten rid of veterans who've actually done the work. So my question here is, for people that translate this into the real world, what is all this going to mean for people in the real world, what they're doing right now?
I love it. Thank you for the question, Senator Klobuchar. I love that you're bringing back to real people and what effect it's having. And what you're spelling out is something that's really important. There's a strategy that they have expressly said. They want to overwhelm you, not us. They want to overwhelm Americans. They want to flood the zone. And so I see a whole bunch of doing things to distract us. Call for Mexico, call for America, Greenland, all these things to try to whip us up and not pay attention to what most Americans are concerned with. And then they can even the big reconciliation bill, they're going to try to do that. We have to find a way to appeal to a small group of Republican Congress people to stop cutting $880 million out of Medicaid. We went through in great detail at length last night why that's bad, but you were pointing something more insidious. Is that big thing that's going on? They actually are cutting the support to get more people signed up with the ACA. Already have. Make it harder to sign up for the ACA. They've already cut the tax credits that are helping people
kidding me?
in the ACA get resources to help with their health care costs. They're going after these things. Here's one that you know really well. They're going
So far away. Fuck.
As we talk about
What a shit show this is going to be.
Members with chronic diseases, we we know one of the things that help people with chronic diseases is having access to fresh, healthy food, but they're cutting access to that for our kids going to school. This administration has not only overseen in 71 days a rise in inflation, a rise in the cost of groceries, a lowering of people's 401ks, stock market going down. It's not only bringing economic chaos, but they are already hurting people on their basic delivery of their services. From taking thousands of jobs out of Social Security, making it harder for people who have some problem to get it solved, to the VA scale. I will definitely yield for a question while retaining Cory.
I was thinking as you talked about the Affordable Care Act and all the work that went into it and what came out of it, I was remembering the constant attempts to repeal that bill. I was remembering when Senator John McCain, I think you were here for this, came in and kind of did the unexpected, right? He went in here, he bumped his party, and he said, he didn't agree with Donald Trump about this. He didn't agree with his leaders on this. He did what he thought was right. And my issue is that we all have these moments where we have to consider what we think is right. And I think about Donald Trump, and he is just now, just this week, he said he wanted to like file the Constitution that practically every single hour. He said that try to serve another term. He would do that. He was literally treating the presidency like he's the king. I guess Elon Musk is the sports doctor at his job, or the White House IT guy. The point is that he's treating the king. You serve on the Judiciary Committee. You are a student of history. You're also a scholar in terms of understanding this government and how it works. And I think one of the things that's most unsettling for people that they just don't understand is how you could have something in place that doesn't respect the democracy. I remember when we all came for the inauguration, and I had the 4 minutes because my job with the Rules Committee to address those gathered in that rotunda. And I know that our democracy can be a hot mess right now, but it's still the form of government that we've got. That our democracy is truly our shelter in the storm. It's our shelter in the storm. Quote a great songwriter from the state of Minnesota. He said that you may have a few songwriters from there. The Senator Gill, the one question who is your best songwriter and singer from the state of New Jersey, just here. When you deal for a question.
New Jersey, there's so many great people and singers, great Bon Jovi, the great Bruce Springsteen, to the incredible chairman of the board from New Jersey, great Frank Sinatra. So we have so many great singers, rappers like Redman. We are just a thriving state of Count Basie. It's just too many. I would not force you to do that. Of course, it's Prince.
Prince and Roger. That aside, I'm very impressed with Senator Booker that after 1,200 pounds, that you still are able to make sure that you mention every songwriter. But that aside, Bob Dylan once had that great line, "Shelter in the Storm." Our democracy, shelter in the storm. And then I noted that day that in some countries, presidential inaugurations, they're held in gilded houses. Not in the United States of America. The United States of America tells them to be quiet. That's what you're doing right now, Senator Booker, because the people's house is where the action is. That's Article 1. And the Constitution specifically says here, we have equal branches of government. And the final thing is that the power in that rotunda that day, and this is where we get into Trump thinking he's king, the power in that rotunda didn't come from the people, and that came from outside. It came from the people. So that's why you see the people standing up right now, our constituents, going to these town halls, standing up, breaking the phone lines of the U.S. Senate, sending in the emails with their stories that we are able, that you've heard the senators and you have read on the Senate floor about things that have happened to your constituents. So that's the power from the outside. So the question that I ask of you is, just tell me what you think people can do when you've got a president there that, you know, he thinks he is king and thinks that democracy is just something that he can just shove aside and say whatever he wants and break whatever rule that people depend on. They could depend on to be able to vote, to be able to participate and have their case made. Tell me what you think. What's the answer to that?
Thank you, Senator. I'll answer that. I see Ron Wyden has come to the fore for both Amy and I, one of the chair people, or at least point ranking members of one of the great committees. To Amy Klobuchar's question, I read a lot of letters. People who were demanding of me something about them, something different. Stand up, speak up, Senator. Stand up, speak up, Senator. Stand up, speak up, Senator. Services for my disabled child, or stand up, speak up. So it's one of the reasons why I'm doing this, why my staff and I talked about this so many games, to do something, show, to let our constituents know, to elevate their voices on the floor, to read their letters, their statements, not just the Jurgens, but a few, the hundreds and hundreds of people that call me, hundreds of people. But I most moved by the letters to tell me about the challenges. They end that question with your question. But I am here to help. I am here to help the island help. You said it, Senator. I read the letter of John McCain last night. His letter explained it so tough like it was hard on the whole lot. But he called the principles and I read it. Friday went wrong again. Same thing here that we have a full division of social security to make it more predictable, but we're not doing it here in Fox. This man is not acting like the president, crashing on constitutional traditions, violating our laws. I support the Supreme Court like trashes the judges so badly that the Supreme Court itself finds that it has to go out and tell him to stop. What stopped healthcare from being taken away in the last time wasn't the persuasive powers of anybody in this side of the political aisle in the Senate convincing anybody over there. I would like to think it was my eloquence, it was Lisa Murkowski. I would like to think it was my high-minded intellect that somehow it was damaged playing too much football, but that somehow I got a right argument to Susan Collins. That wasn't it. I would like to think it was my ability to stand up to John McCain himself. No, none of that. It was the people. It was the people. You remember the little lobbyists in their wheelchairs rolling up to senators and speaking their hearts, telling them of their pain and their fear. It was people coming here and marching, people coming and flooding the cold like they did, like they're doing now. People writing letters, people.
The freedom of the galaxy remains in jeopardy. Let us join the fight.
Coming in and saying this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And so you're asking me what we can do. I know what we can do, but we've got to, as the great song.
This operation is complete.
Senator Klobuchar, I have my staff print a bunch of things I sent them. I sent them because I knew they were some of my favorite people from history. There's one here, Webster. There's one by Jefferson. There's letters from Birmingham jail, Langston Hughes, something by Harper Lee, Emma Lazarus. But here's one. Here's the answer. In a poem, and forgive me for reading this. I wanted to do it at some point today, and this is perfect. And I see my senator here. You may have a question, but I love this poem. It was written and put to song by a man named James Weldon Johnson. He's an educator, a poet, a diplomat, a civil rights activist, born in the great state of Florida. And he said that this is what we have to do. every voice would sing. With every voice would sing, for earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound like the golden sea. Sing a song full of the faith the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Faced with the rising sun of a new day begun, let us march on. Let us march on. Let us march on until victory is won. It doesn't ignore the wretchedness of our history. It speaks to the truth and the excitement and the hope about that past and the virtues that our ancestors gave us. It goes on. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way with the tears, which tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered, out of the gloomy past, till now we stand at last where the white gleam of the bright stars is cast. Last stanza. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the night, keep us forever in the path we pray, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, lest our hearts drunk with the wine of the world we forget thee. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God and true to this native land. What can we do? Is do like our ancestors did. What can we do? Do like the people who never gave up, who even when this country that they loved didn't love them back, they kept fighting and pushing. And we know that, Senator Klobuchar, because we've witnessed that. In my time in the Senate with you, we've seen the most amazing, shocking moment with the Bergefell case of the Supreme Court, recognizing the humanity, the dignity, and equal rights of LGBTQ Americans to have love and marry. We've seen fights in this time that we've been here. We've seen victories on healthcare that made such a difference in people's lives. We've seen the fights while we've been here, some of the most painful moments where we've seen the arc of the moral universe bent, not by the people here.
Fuck you guys.
Not by the people in this body. You think we got suffrage because a bunch of men on the Senate floor said, okay, guys, come on, put your hands in here. Ready to give women the right to vote on free. Ready to break that. That's not how it happened. It's not how it happened. It happened because the power of the people is greater than the people in power. You think we got civil rights because one day Strom Thurmond, after filibustering for 24 hours, you think we got civil rights because he came to the floor one day and said, I've seen the light. Those Negro people have the right to vote. No, we got civil rights because people marched for it, sweat for it, and John Lewis bled for it. And so I'm scared too. But fear is a necessary precondition to courage. I am angry too. But my mom told me never let your anger consume you. Channel it, fuel it, so it can help your love be greater and stronger. And Klobuchar, that's what this moment means. And our job in this body is to be truth tellers. Our job, just as you said, so brilliantly, to elevate the voices of the people of the country, because you're right, Amy Klobuchar, this is the people's house. It's Article 1 of the Constitution, and it's under assault. Article 1 is under assault. Our spending powers, our budgetary powers, the power to establish agencies like the Department of Education and USAID is under assault by a president who doesn't respect this document. And how do we stop them? I'm sorry to say we hold powerful positions. We are elected by great states, but we're the minority right now. You spelled out at the beginning of your questions to me. It will take 3 people of conscience on that side. It will take 4 here. Going back to my book because there's somebody that you know, I don't know if my staff put it in at the last moment. Yes, they did. Margaret Chase Stevens, who you know. Margaret Chase Smith, excuse me. A U.S. Senator from Maine, a Republican. When a demagogue had roamed in the land exploiting people's fear, deporting Jews who were not citizens of this country because they were accusing them of being communists, at times that this body was being twisted and supported the will of a demagogue, where nobody had the courage to stand up. It was a woman from the Republican Party that stood somewhere in this body. Her feet might have been tired, her heart might have been hurt, she might have been afraid of the consequences to stand up to people preaching the Red Scare. But this woman in this body, rare thing in those years, this woman in this body who are founders, who are the perfect geniuses that wrote this Constitution, the woman in this body who wasn't imagined by the founders. Thank God they called upon us to make a more perfect union. And generations of activists finally made it real that women could serve in this body. She had the courage, the audacity to call her own party to task. I read her words. She said, I don't believe that the Republican Party sent a party of fear, but I do believe that the Republican Party has made an alliance with the four horsemen of fear. The fear of communists, the fear of labor unions, the fear of the future, the fear of progress. I think it's high time that we remember that we have sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution to continue. I think it's time that we remember that the Constitution, as amended, speaks not only the freedom of speech, but also the freedom of trial by jury. This great senator, this great Republican said whether it is criminal prosecutions in a court or character prosecution in the Senate, there is little political distinction when the life of a person has been ruined. Those of us who shout the loudest about Americanism, in making character assassinations all too frequently, those who, by our own words and acts, ignore some of the basic principles of what it means to be an American. The right to criticize without thinking the president is going to drag you from the office for criticizing him. The right to hold unpopular beliefs. That if you have beliefs that I find contemptible, it doesn't mean that I can disappear you from a city street. She goes on, the right to protest. And just for assembling and speaking up, that's not a right to cut hundreds of millions of dollars that university's science funding, the right to independent thought. The exercise of these rights should not cost one single American citizen his reputation or his right to a livelihood, nor should he be in danger of losing his reputation or livelihood merely because he happens to know someone who holds unpopular beliefs, like a law firm that represents suing the president and now has their very firms, their very livelihoods, the legal secretaries and others come after them. Margaret Chase Smith goes on to call her party to be a woman of conscience, to stand up and say, I quote, the American people are sick and tired of being afraid to speak their minds, politically smeared as communists or fascists by their opponents. Freedom of speech, she says, is not what it used to be in America. It has been so abused by some.
Hellpods Prime.
Stand up in this body and say it is wrong to put these head members in the
Interesting.
Secretary of Defense because he's unqualified. He's unqualified. Synchronized. Look at a single chat to see how unqualified he is. Margaret Chase Smith continues. As a Republicans, I say to my colleagues on this side of the aisle that the Republican Party faces challenges today that is not unlike the challenges it faced by Lincoln back in the day. The Republican Party so successfully met that challenge that it emerged from the Civil War as the champion of the United Nations. In addition to being the party which unrelentingly
Signs of disloyalty should be reported to the Democracy Officer.
I doubt if the Republican Party simply could do so simply because I do not believe the American people will uphold any political party that puts political exploitation above the national interest. Surely we Republicans are not so desperate for victory. I do not want to see the Republican Party win that way. While it might be a fleeting victory for the Republican Party, it would be a more lasting defeat for the American people. She surely it would be ultimately a suicide for the Republican Party and the two-party system itself that has protected American liberty from the dictatorship of a one-party system. You ask me, Amy Klobuchar, what we need to do. We need to call the of our comrades in the People's Branch and say, how can we go along with a reconciliation that will put trillions of dollars of debt on our children and our children's children? How can we go along with cutting $800 billion of Medicaid? Only if tax cuts to the wealthiest and disproportionately go to the wealthiest. How can your fiscal law, your Christian conservative, how aren't we protected, rich and powerful? That is the answer to your question. The people of the United States of America have to stand up and say no. I want a veteran, a police officer, a teacher, not in America. Won't allow it. Won't allow it.
Have a taste of democracy!
Well, the senator from New Jersey yields the question. We yield for a question while retaining support. Thank my colleague, and I have been listening to this, and a Herculean presentation for hours and hours. Your remarks reflect the urgency of our time, Senator Booker, and I thank you for it. Let me frame the question this way. I hold open to all town hall meetings in every county in my state each year. I've had more than 1,100 of them, and since Trump took office, what we have seen in these town hall meetings is fear and terror, and I might add, record turnout. I was in a small town in Central Oregon recently, Sisters, had almost 1,400 people here. And what people asked about this morning is, of course, Medicaid, Social Security, because these are programs involving health care and retirement that are really the connective tissue between the government and our people. Programs that pay for essentials. We're not going to fancy places. Groceries, we're paying rent, we're buying things. We had one separate town hall meeting in the state of my college just with federal employees. The goal is to get out into the war and how to prevent fire in Oregon. Our organized meetings, they too are terrified. They've dedicated their lives to trying to help. Now, we serve the American people. I tell the Afghan Service in Action over the last few hours that you're reflecting the urgency of our time. Our salaries are paid for by taxpayers. And I'm particularly troubled by the fact that we're getting all these reports that many senators are saying, I'm not going to do town hall meetings. They're on the other side of the aisle. Said I've had 1,100 of them, 10 of them so far this year. Seems to me that's refusing to answer constituents. And you've been here all night, and you're setting a very clear example about what it means.
What the fuck?
To push back against authoritarianism. So just like I have town hall meetings, my question to my friend from New Jersey, what do you hear from home? Pretty straightforward question. Sure is. Yeah. Is what the times are all about. What's important to you? When I talk about town meetings, I had to tell a town hall, say to my friend during the speech that was made on the floor of the House, I had 30,000 people participating. That's a lot for my small state. I know what I'm doing, and I think the American people would like to hear a bit about what my colleague is hearing from his state and why it's so important. He's out here mopping his brow today, trying to stay on his feet, making the case for the urgency of our time. What are you hearing?
Thank you, Senator. I'm hearing a lot of fear, a lot of anger. I'm hearing head of hospitals say that this is
The fuck?
Outrageous the threats to our hospitals in New Jersey. I'm hearing heads of critical health services tell me what the Medicaid cuts will mean to their organizations. I'm hearing from Catholic priests that are doing extraordinary things in service of their communities. I'm hearing from citizens who are veterans who got fired from their jobs. I'm hearing from people, as I read letters from people who work in the Social Security Agency, and what the chaos that's been created and the lack of the deteriorating service to seniors. I've heard from seniors who are terrified about what's being done.
What the fuck?
I'm hearing demands from our constituents, people demanding, Senator, that we do something about the outrages they're seeing. And I think that
Why can't it fucking reload?
New Jerseyans, by larger and larger numbers, and I'll be back in my state. I know we were planning meetings and a town hall and a lot more this weekend. But I have to say, now more than ever,
The fuck? You couldn't blow up the thing behind the fucking... Where is the thing?
need more of it. And one of the reasons I'm here...
What the fuck are these bombs even good for? God damn.
I want to tell the stories
Pieces of shit.
that my constituents are writing in about, and lift their voices and tell them that they're seen, they're heard.
Clear the area.
I've been going through section by section, as you pointed out, Social Security, section on healthcare, section on education, Department of Education, and that work that it does. I've been going point by point through. This is the agenda. How much am I going to get through?
God, shit show.
Immigration, we went through with housing, the environment, farmers and food, veterans, the corruption that's been normalized by this president, the rule of law, public safety, all the ways that we know that there is a crisis in our country, and we as a nation need to be more tuned to it and doing more to meet this crisis, to rise up and defend our country, defend our well-being. And all along, things are happening that you know. You're the chairman of the Finance Committee, and you have these insights. We've talked about them, about what's about to happen in this reconciliation process. I mean, that's one of the most stunning things that's almost immediate on this floor. I think we're going to see about the tariffs tomorrow and see how far the president will go, but we do know whatever it is, it's going to affect prices that are going to continue to go up for Americans, as inflation continue to go up for Americans, as the stock markets continue to go down, as people 401ks have lost so much money. The uncertainty I'm hearing from businesses in New Jersey, the chaos that they feel about the economy, the consumer confidence in this country has gone way down.
Did I?
If you ask the question, are you better off than you were 71 days ago?
Stop being so fucking lame.
They're better off. Their costs are higher, their groceries are higher. They're soon to see everything from car prices to food go higher. Their retirement security is under attack. Their health care is under attack. They're losing their Department of Education. They're less safe from infectious diseases abroad. There's so many things that we have to talk to and try to stop. And you're our leader on the Finance Committee, and you know that the tax thing they're trying to run through this now, I'm trying to get my head wrapped around these wacky parliamentary things that even the podcast I listened to in morning to inform me, say they even spoke about this years and years ago, but they said, oh, this is too crazy, we can't do this. They're trying to tell the American people somehow that the trillions of dollars of tax cuts that we're going to give disproportionately to the wealthiest people all, there's nothing to see here that has a zero impact on the budget, so we can do it through reconciliation. That is the biggest focus, manufactured artifice that I've ever seen to obscure the truth in America. That what the Republicans are trying to do is cut massively into health care for Americans in order to give tax cuts to the wealthiest, disproportionately to the wealthiest who don't need it, and to drive up the deficit, making our children and our children's children have a more dangerous economy and higher debt payments to make, debt payments that will skyrocket higher than any expense the government makes. We are literally about to see something go through reconciliation that threatens to sacrifice our children's future so that the rich can get richer. And so, we know there's a lot of people who are angry, crazed, who are worried, who are feeling overwhelmed, who are struggling to make ends meet, but I know only one way to do this, and I'm trying to do it myself, is to do things differently, to stand up, to speak up, to not act like this is just normal in our country. There's not a president from Eisenhower to Reagan to Bush on the Republican side that could ever imagine a day where in a UN vote we side with Russia and China against the Western democracies that we saved in World War II, that we stormed beaches of Normandy for, that we did the Berlin airlift for, that we did the Marshall Plan for. We designed the world order, and now we're turning our back on it. We designed the rules-based world order, and we're turning our back on those organizations. From trashing NATO to getting out of the World Health Organization to getting out of the group of countries coming together to deal with climate change. We're not leading the planet Earth anymore. Our allies are saying openly they can't trust us. The quotes are unbelievable by our allies. Generations of Americans all know one thing: Russia is our adversary. This principle was reinforced after Russia's brutal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022. The American public knows a lot about Putin and his cronies, what they've done to the brave people of Ukraine. Russia has abducted over 19,000 children, taking them from their families and homeland. Russia has targeted civilians.
Shit. Come on, move.
Hospitals and schools, including a strike on a children's hospital during the supposed ceasefire negotiations a few weeks ago. Russian forces have raped and assaulted Ukrainian civilians, and Russia has tortured prisoners of war.
Where's my fucking bomb?
One would think, given all the horrors inflicted by
Stop.
Russia, that the United States would continue to treat Russia as an adversary and a pariah that other Western democracies not to be treated. But that's not what Trump has done. He's done the opposite. On the third anniversary of Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, the Trump administration joined Russia and North Korea in voting against a UN resolution condemning the invasion that has killed over 12,000 Ukrainian civilians and injured 30,000. The foreign minister of a great ally in NATO in my office looking at me and saying, basically, what the heck? My friend Chris Murphy on the floor, we sit close to each other, he's further up the diocese foreign relations, and this stuff is insanity. Here's NBC News. President Donald Trump has said Ukraine, not Russia, started the war. He called Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, not Vladimir Putin. He called Zelensky a dictator. Meanwhile, Trump's administration is standing down the speed of tough anti-Kremlin policy. In just over a month, Trump has executed a startling realignment of American foreign policy, effectively throwing U.S. support behind Moscow and rejecting the tight alliance with Kiev, cultivated by former President Joe Biden. The extraordinary pivot has upended decades of hawkish foreign policy towards Russia that provided a rare area of bipartisan consensus in an increasingly divided nation. Trump's recent moves have drawn international attention, unsettling U.S. alliances and thrilling conservative populists who favor a turn away from Zelensky. The new posture was put in stark relief on Friday during a tense Oval Office meeting. We all remember this. Between Trump and Zelensky, the leaders clashed in front of the press, raising questions about the future of American support for Kyiv. Alliances and partners around the world are our biggest strength against any U.S. adversary or competitor, from China to Russia to Iran to North Korea. We are the strongest nation on the planet Earth but our strength is multiplied and magnified when we stand in alliance with those nations that share our values and are bonded to us and are committed to us. In fact, the only time Article 5 in the United Nations, that article that says that if one person in NATO is attacked, everyone is attacked, and they all join together, that one time it happened was 9/11, when our NATO allies stood up with America. And so look at NATO. It's been the bedrock of the international order for 80 years. It was created in 1949 by 12 countries, including the United States, to provide collective security. And in many ways, it provides collective security against the Soviet Union. Since then, 20 more countries have joined NATO through 10 rounds of enlargement, bringing the total number of NATO countries to 32. The most recent additions were Sweden in 2024 and Finland in 2023, who applied to join NATO in 2022 after Russia invaded Ukraine, because those countries are realizing that the authoritarian dictator that Putin is, who threatens his smaller neighbors, those other nations have realized they should be standing with NATO. But we have a principle of collective defense. As I said, enshrined in Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. Collective defense means an attack on one ally is considered an attack against all allies. A strong NATO has made America safer and stronger and more prosperous. My colleagues on both sides of the aisle recognize this. I've been in this body for 12 years. I've been told by people who I've learned from about foreign policy when I came here as a mayor, and leaned on people like Chris Coons, and leaned on people like Chris Murphy, leaned on people like John McCain, leaned on people like Lindsey Graham, leaned on people like Senator Rubio. He helped pass a law that enshrined congressional action before the president can withdraw from NATO. That law passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. 87 senators voted yes. Senator Rubio, now Secretary of State, said, and I quote, NATO serves as an essential military alliance that protects shared natural interests and enhances America's international presence. Any decision to leave the alliance should be rigorously debated, considered by the U.S. Congress with the input of the American people. 2 weeks ago, on March 19th in 2025, in response to news that the Pentagon may give up the role of supreme allied commander in Europe, a position held by American generals since the NATO alliance was formed in 1949. Republican Senator Wicker and Representative Rogers signaled their opposition in an extraordinarily joint statement warning to Donald Trump that change would, quote, risk undermining American deterrence around the globe. I want to read some of the comments of NATO partners about the damage that has been done in just the last 71 days of Trump's leadership in upending the world order that has helped to keep America stronger and safer and more prosperous. The EU's top diplomat said the free world needs a new leader. Think about that. Think about that. The EU's top diplomat has said in response to Donald Trump that now the free world needs a new leader. Every president of my lifetime was seen as the leader of the free world, and now the rest of the free world, top diplomat is saying it's time for that to change. The new German chancellor said, my absolute priority will be to strengthen Europe as quickly as possible so that step by step we can really achieve independence from the USA. Say something like this on a television program, but after Donald Trump's statements, it is clear that the Americans, at least this part of the Americans, this administration, are largely indifferent to the fate of Europe. Our ancestors saved Europe. Our ancestors stormed beaches in Normandy, paratrooped into Europe, liberated concentration camps. Our ancestors sacrificed blood and treasure for Europe. You turn Germany from one of history's worst and
you bastards.
to a global economic power in a democracy. We were there at the Berlin Airlift.
Where did it even come from?
For the Marshall Plan.
Where'd that random fucking shot even come from?
And now Europe
Oh shit.
is saying it is clear that of the Americas, at least that part of the Americas, this administration are largely indifferent to the fate of Europe. That is not true. That is not true. And as long as I have breath in my body and blood in my veins, will Jordan with the other people on both sides of the aisle, God bless you, Roger Wicker, we're standing with the understanding that America is the strongest nation in the world, but our strength is multiplied and magnified. We stand with our allies from Germany to Japan, from Australia to Iceland, that when our country stands up, we don't bully our neighbors like Canada. We don't threaten our allies like Iceland, like Greenland. We don't threaten smaller, weaker nations like Panama. We don't upend the world order. Donald Trump does not speak for me. He does not speak for the traditions of this body. He doesn't speak for the people that are buried, Americans that are buried. In Germany and in France and all over Europe. Here is former Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin's speech to NATO and the Atlantic Council. On April 4th, 1949, 12 democracies came together in the wake of 2 world wars, the dawn of a new Cold War, and they all remembered, as President Truman put it then, the sickening blow of unprovoked aggression. That's what Truman said. They were coming together against the sickening blow of unprovoked aggression. You hear that, Putin? And so they vowed to stand together for their collective defense and to safeguard freedom and democracy across Europe and North America. They made a solemn commitment declaring that an armed attack against one ally would be considered an attack against all. Now, that commitment was enshrined in Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. It was the foundation of NATO, and it still is. And on that bedrock, we have built the strongest and most successful defense alliance in all of human history, and I'll say one of the most prosperous, democratic countries. Throughout the Cold War, NATO deterred Soviet aggression.
The freedom of the galaxy remains in jeopardy. Let us join the fight.
NATO used air power to stop ethnic cleansing in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo. And the day after September 11th,
this operation is complete. You have served democracy well.
Including planting a plane into the Pentagon not far from here. NATO invoked Article 5 for the first and only time in history.
Coordinates locked. Hellpods prime.
I yield to one of my best friends in the Senate. I yield to one of the smartest guys I know. I yield to the guy who handed me the chairmanship of the committee that oversaw world public health and Africa, and still reminds me that he knows more Swahili than I'll ever know. I yield to the guy who, when he speaks up in the Senate, people on both sides of the aisle listen. I yield to my friend who has real friendships, who when I came to and said, we are seeing the worst famines on the planet Earth, that Joe Biden didn't put enough money into the world feeding programs. He went to another appropriator over there, another friend of ours, Lindsey Graham, and together we got billions of dollars of war that saved hundreds of thousands of lives. You are a prince of a man. You are my friend. You are somebody that is a hero who folks don't know their name in the countries that you've affected with your strength on foreign policy. Dear God, my friend, I yield the floor for a question while retaining the floor. And excuse me, I'm going to say that correctly. I yield for a question while retaining the floor. I do not yield the floor.
I asked my friend and colleague from New Jersey if he is familiar with Psalm 30, verse 5.
Not at this moment.
Because I think it speaks to weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. This is a holy month. It is the month of Lent. It is the month of Ramadan. reflected in Passover. And my question to my colleagues is rooted in a scripture in the Torah, in the Psalms, which will be known to both of us. One widely engaged in these days. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy for the morning. This is a reminder both of the possibility of redemption, of the urgency of hope, and of your night-long sacrifice on this soul. Let me ask, if I might, two more questions of friends. Deploying equipment package. To my colleagues from New Jersey, are you familiar with a front-page story in the Washington Post entitled "Trump USAID Triple American Response to Myanmar Earthquake," an article running today in the Washington Post?
I have not read the paper this day, but I
had suspected that might be the case, given that my colleague from New Jersey dedicates his night to standing tall and fighting hard to make sure that the people of the United States know what is going on. And I'll share with you just for a moment that it occurred to watch the national evening news last night and see a Chinese humanitarian emergency response team celebrated as they told survivors of the earthquake rubble in Myanmar. It did not hurt that there are Chinese nationals. It hurt my heart that exactly those who are the very best in the world responding to humanitarian crisis, exactly those had just received termination letters, and their work with USAID had just been spent. Normally, in every humanitarian crisis I've known in my life, the first in are the men and women of USAID and the U.S. Army Forces. Whether a tsunami, a tornado, wildfire, or an earthquake, we have world-leading humanitarian response capability. And I think it is a tragedy that we have not. I think it is a tragedy, and it is reflected in this
much
article
better.
that I've asked my colleague about, and the response of the world, that we have created an enormous opening for the PRC to come in and do what we previously did so well. Let me ask another question, if I might, of my colleague. Are you familiar with what has just happened to food banks all over our nation in terms of an announcement about impending deliveries of badly needed surplus food? This, I suspect, will be the focus of your future comments on agriculture, but I mention it as something that has impacted my state, and I suspect yours as well.
When you ask me a question, to yield for a question, I want to say I yield for a question while retaining more. And I want to say to this colleague, I'm familiar with some of this, but as a part of a question to me and not anything resembling colloquy, I will yield for a question while retaining the floor if you have another question.
My colleague, are you familiar with an article, USDA calls billions of dollars worth of delivery?
I'm pretty sure I am.
I will simply then ask my colleague a question.
Therefore, if you were to ask me a question, I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
To my colleague, I ask the question, are you familiar with the cuts that have been imposed to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, suspending hundreds of millions of meals to Americans in need, and the justification for that being?
Last 15 hours. So thank you.
Last question.
I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Oof.
My colleague from New Jersey, I asked the question, are you familiar with when, whether, and why NATO has invoked Article 5 and how the service, the sacrifice that followed, reinforces exactly the point I believe my colleague was beginning to speak to, which is the common cause and the common purpose shown by all of our NATO allies in America's greatest moment of need in recent decades, the attacks to
I'm very familiar with that. It wants me that when America was in crisis, 11 miles from ground zero.
And To my colleague, are you aware which of our European lost per capita the highest number of their soldiers serving alongside American service members? A nation I visited, a nation whose service members I visited, a nation that is today aggrieved, was made recently. Are you familiar with our trusted ally, Denmark?
Yes, I am. That country that has shed more blood than any of our allies, side by side, fighting with America. It's Canada.
Oh, wow. Canada.
Denmark.
Oh, it's Denmark.
Really?
Denmark lost per capita, I believe. Excuse me. Let me simply ask.
I was going to say Britain, but.
Thank you very much. I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Is my colleague aware that broadly distributed across our NATO allies,
Jeopardy hour. How dare you?
including the loss of their troops in combat, and that every single loss in combat was a loss of great service and sacrifice by our NATO allies?
This poor man must be so tired and hungry and thirsty. Holy shit.
Denmark, try to blame them in a way that is a rhetoric that fashions more after the behavior of Vladimir Putin's threatening before the Ukrainian invasion, as opposed to what allies do who are grateful for shared sacrifice, who are grateful for shared honor, who are grateful for shared prosperity. What is happening right now to me is shameful. How we're treating our allies is unacceptable. Tariffs will be imposed, will indeed hurt Canada and other NATO allies. But they will hurt us in the long run more, not only in the immediacy of the driving up of prices for America.
Just the way they feel about us.
What the president is doing, it turns us back on Republican traditions and American Democratic traditions. It's going to hurt us more as a nation in the long run, as other countries look to other places for leadership of the free world.
Familiar with the testimony of General Jim Mattis, a decorated four-star Marine Corps general who served as Secretary of Defense in the previous Trump administration, who testified about what the consequences would be if we were to defund development and defense.
I hope that the colleague of mine, who again has been a mentor, a friend on all things foreign policy, my belief is that he's referring to when General Mattis sat before the United States Senate and said very pointedly, if you cut the foreign aid, you cut organizations like USAID, you cut programs of the State Department, then buy me more support.
Will my colleague yield for final question?
I yield for a question.
My colleague has an opinion about whether it strengthens or harms America in our national security. We have an earned reputation as a nation of compassion,
Zimbabwe. Honor democratic principles. Needs to honor free and fair elections. That we want to be your partner, we want to be your friend. But it's time for a new, peaceful, democratic Zimbabwe. And as we landed, I don't know if you remember, he was landing too. The airport, and he was coming from China. He was coming from China. With different values. In fact, you and I will see now all over the continent of Africa a competition. We come with USAID. We come with PEPFAR. We come with a program called AGOA, helping with economic development. We come with scientists.
Coordinates locked.
Wow.
Hellpods prime. Engaging orbital sensors.
Was when the Ebola scare was happening 8 years ago. And we're starting to show up on our shores. You did something that people were afraid to do. You went to Africa to visit with the people from our country that are there fighting Ebola. You had to come in quarantine when you came back to make sure you didn't have it. It was amazing because you were going there to save the world. Chris Boone, Senator for Delaware here, but America is here. America knows that an infectious disease anywhere is a threat to public health everywhere. America knows that when it comes to the globe, Martin Luther King was right. Miracle proclamation in a letter from Birmingham jail that we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a common garment of destiny.
Fucking hell is today?
Is a threat to justice everywhere. I have been to where you've been, from Kenza and Tanzania to traveling with you to Ouagadougou. You used to make me smile when I used to say the capital of Burkina Faso. Ouagadougou, my friend. There's a word I learned. The language. That's the language. It basically roughly translates into this. I am because we are. We are. America has learned the power of soft power. General Mattis knew much cheaper investment, much more success. The string of successes that we've had in the last 25 years have been with our soft power, with our 20-year wars in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. General Mattis knew that. He gave wisdom. He said, do not cut the State Department. Do not cut USAID. They are making an invaluable contribution to fighting terrorism, to fighting instability, to spreading democracy, to fighting infectious diseases. We'll keep those stands. But now, we're shrinking. We're retreating. We're pulling back. We're cutting aid. And when crises are happening like we're seeing in Myanmar right now, we don't even have the personnel to be there to help people. But you know who does? China. And they show up. They leverage influence. You and I know this at the continent of Africa. To here, take our money, take our money. We can get them.
Yep, I've heard that.
Like they have right next to us, Djibouti. Chinese are playing a long game, and Trump is playing into their hands.
Fucking
and
dumbass.
weakening our nation, not just against infectious diseases, not just against the global fight against climate change, not just against the economic opportunities that we're missing out on in the continent of Africa. And guess what? If you don't know this, by 2050, 1 out of every 4 people on the planet Earth will live on the continent of Africa. 1 out of every 3 working-age people on the planet Earth will be on the continent of Africa. China's playing the long game. Not only critical rare earth minerals, but the economic power, the most populous continent on the planet. What are we doing? Trump, we're doing Michael Jackson. We're moonwalking away from that continent, saying, China, go ahead.
Whatever.
I love you, Chris Coons. I am the ranking member of this subcommittee, inspired by you, Chris Coons. And the work that you, me, and Lindsey Graham, John McCain did over the last 10 years is being swept away as our allies are saying frightening things that they have to look elsewhere for leadership and not the people that save the free world. It is a shame that we're doing my grandparents' generation. My grandmother with her war bonds in her victory garden at my grandfather's building customers at the Willow Run Bomber plant in Michigan. The whole country came together and sacrificed for the war effort. We saved Europe. We bled and died on that European continent. There are, you've seen them, these fields of crosses, and you see some Stars of David, and you see some Muslim graves. You see it all. Our American boys died. And yet we still invested in that continent. We still invested in the Marshall Plan. We still invested with the Berlin Airlift. We still stood up to communism. And the great Republican president stood up in front of a Russian autocratic leader and said, Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And what is Trump going to be remembered for? I really love Vladimir Putin.
What a loser.
You're my friend.
Fucking Trump.
You and I both visit VA homes. Occasionally we meet a World War II veteran. In my state, there are some incredible men that still wear their hat. And if they can, they stand with pride. They are called the greatest generation. What are we doing to their legacy? What are we doing to their legacy? I'm going to keep talking unless somebody wants to say, will the senator yield for a question?
The senator yield for a question.
Okay.
I yield for a question while
Teamwork.
First of all, thank you so much for what you are doing, Senator Booker. You are drawing our nation's attention to what Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Doge are seeking to do to our country, especially the most vulnerable in our society. And you, Senator Booker, you have been a champion for the poor, for the sick, for the disabled, for those most in need throughout your entire life. That is who you are. You are absolutely a champion for those who need help the most. So as we look at what Donald Trump is proposing to destroy the Department of Education, just the level, knowing that Title I money goes to the poorest children in Newark, in Boston, so that they can have as close to an equal footing as possible, so that they too can compete to ensure they enjoy the American dream. To not Medicaid, knowing that there's 338,000 people just in Massachusetts alone who are on disabilities.
I have Medicaid. As he explained earlier, may not be called Medicaid, but it's Medicaid. I have a mass health.
To begin a process of saying that Social Security is a policy scheme. And knowing that ultimately they need the billions of dollars for the tax rate for billionaires. And they have to get it out of education. They have to get it out of Medicaid. They have to get it out of Medicaid. They have to get it out of Social Security. We know that the plot is to get $2 trillion out of the programs that affect all people in order to have tax breaks for the wealthiest people in our nation. And most of it will come out of health care. Will come out of Medicaid. Ultimately out of Medicaid. The Affordable Care Act. Out of health care. For every family, for the wealthiest in our society, don't need a tax break. And one thing they don't need right now is a tax break, especially when Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Jeff Zuckerberg now control more wealth than the bottom 50% of our nation combined. Do they really need a tax break? I mean, I know the president put him right behind him at his inauguration, but oh my God, the cabinet sits behind billionaires? The founding fathers are spinning in their graves, thinking about how they've inverted what is supposed to be the way in which our government, our country works. So So I thank you for your incredible leadership. You are putting the spotlight on what is going wrong in this country right now. This oligarchy seeking to take over our nation. So I thank the senator for what he is doing. It is just so consistent with his whole life, what he stands for. What he stands for on the floor of the Senate today, a conscience for the nation. So can the senator tell the Senate today, the nation, what this could mean if we continue down this path of Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Doge for those families who need help the most in our society?
I so appreciate the senator, and I want to tell folks, when I wrote my book, I thought I knew this man here, but I did a lot about environmental justice in my book.
Galactic War.
Did about a lot of these toxic chemicals out there that are threatening our people. And I came to the office of the Senate one day, so humbled, because I told him I knew you as my colleague. We both got here around the same time. But I had no idea of the kind of things he did in the United States House of Representatives, how many bills that made a difference for people's lives in Boston and Newark and Camden and Passaic. Are one of the people that, after a few years here, I discovered in 2015, writing my book, how amazing his career is. And now, having served in the Senate about the same amount of time, I'm so grateful for you. And you have been so consistent in why you came here, not forgetting the people you've been fighting for your whole career. And so your question is right aligned with that point. You said earlier about this humanity's biggest fight, humanity's biggest consistent theme, us versus them or just us. I don't like when we pit one group in this country against another. It's not us versus the billionaires or us versus the Republicans. It's understanding what is best for we the people. How can we create a more perfect? I can tell you this right now. We are in trouble compared to our global peers. We have higher disease rates, diabetes rates, cancer rates, higher maternal mortality rates, higher premature birth rates, higher infant mortality rates. There are so many things going on in this country that should not go on. But yet we are a nation of utter abundance. We are a nation of incredible wealth and resources. And we've proven in our past to be a nation of incredible vision. And that's why I don't understand why we are playing so small, why we have a president that is playing so small. It's not coming here like presidents of the past saying, we together, from Reagan, Clinton, to Obama, there's a big challenge, America. We together are going to get into the room and discuss this, making Republicans and Democrats, and we're going to find a way to write great legislation. Whatever you want to say about Joe Biden, he was a big president because he didn't try to do things like executive fiat or his quote, the primacy of the executive, ignoring our Constitution. You know how many bipartisan bills were hammered out here? I see another dear friend of mine, Mark Warner. You know how many bipartisan bills Mark Warner was at the table for? My senior senator was chairman of Intelligence. We did bipartisan infrastructure acts. When Trump in his first term had infrastructure week every other week. We did a chips and science bill. He's trying to claw back some money, but we together, I still remember that gift, where the whole Senate was there, the National Security Team, and Gina Raimondo put forward the crisis in our country, the vulnerabilities, and we came out of that room, we got into our room, and we hammered out a great chips and science bill.
That is fucking shit.
Doing nothing on gun violence. Decades of courageous people on the Republican side, friends of mine that surprised me that stood up like Senator Cornyn and said, we're going to do something. You got your life, but let's find space in the middle. We did programs. Up in New Jersey, community violence intervention money is lowering murder rates in places like Newark by over 50%, helping to get it done along with their great law enforcement officers. The incredible thing about that now is Trump is trying to claw back that money, violating the separation of powers, because we decide how we're spending money in America, not the executive. Read the Constitution. So you and I both know that a big president would come to here and say, let's do some legislation. But John McCain, and I read it in the middle of the night, but John McCain is really important. John McCain, I won't read it, but I will tell it, voted against the healthcare laptop, the taking away healthcare for millions of Americans, and said that because of the dysfunction of this body, if we don't come together and do something bigger and bolder to provide better healthcare, bring the ideas that both sides think for Americans, and replace the imperfections of the Affordable Care Act with smarter and better things. Donald Trump. He's repeating why the mistakes, but not with the ACA, which affects tens of millions of Americans, with Medicaid, that affects 70 to 100 million Americans. Why? You ask why? Well, we know why. There's two things that this will achieve. Two things. One, as you said it, it is because he wants to not just renew the Trump tax cuts, but expand them that have disproportionate benefits to the wealthiest. And I wish the wealthiest in the country, names that we know, people like Elon Musk would say, I don't want a tax cut. I wish he would say the truth. I don't need a tax cut. But no, that's one of the reasons. He wants to renew a program that gave disproportionate money, but that's not the only reason. There's a cruelty in what he's doing. It's so offensive. He seems to have no respect for people with disabilities. He made fun of a journalist with a disability once. He seems to have no respect for people who are working hard and struggling and still can't make ends meet. No respect for people that are afraid of his language and his threats. They think that what he's doing to Social Security might be, they don't have to. What he's saying to Medicare and Medicaid are lies because he got more registered lies than any president of my lifetime. They don't think they can trust this president not to hurt them because he already is. So I was told by my parents what defines you as a person is not what happens, but how you choose to respond. What happens to us as a nation is not what happens to us. Bomb us from Pearl Harbor to attack us at 9/11. The American character was defined by how we responded to those crises. And yes, there have been major political crises before, but we responded by bending the arc of our nation more towards justice, taking care of more and more people, saying that we belong to each other in America. It is we the people. It is we the people. You see the stances of my friend, Mark Warner. I don't know if he has a question, but I know what I'm told to say. He asked me to yield for a question. I yield for a question. I yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Welcome aboard, Helldiver. Now that...
Well, Mr. President, when they joined...
Oh, I'm off here.
Massachusetts won to celebrate
the
Senator from New Jersey's endurance, his willingness to continue to make this case in as clear a term, the Senator from New Jersey's endurance, my friend and colleague from Massachusetts, won to celebrate the Senator from New Jersey's endurance, his willingness to continue to make this case in as clear terms as possible. Not having been here last night at 6:30, I do wonder when he started this speech-a-thon at 6:30 whether the bob and the weave and the move was quite as strong, or was he firmly attached to the podium. The fact that you are going on more than 12 hours now, look like you've got hours ahead and hours before you sleep, and knowing that there are other members who've got a question, including Majority Leader. I just want to be brief with mine. You've talked a lot with great passion about the damage done domestically. Chairman of the Intelligence Committee, now Vice Chairman. I have been aghast at the sloppiness of this administration time after
time after time in terms of their treatment of classified information. First 2 weeks of the administration, strangely, a couple hundred CIA agents' identities were revealed on a non-classified chain. These probationary employees,
I'm off.
new employees, the American government had spent a couple $100,000 on